The Bishop Hightower. Absolutely. My grandmother.
Mr. Evans, Walter, we ready? All right, residents, we're gonna get started. I'd like to call to order our emergency utility special district meeting. The date is July 24th. The time is 5:12 p.m. Madam Clerk, roll call. Here.
Here.
I think you may need to push it down just to purify the record. Check that. There you go.
Okay. Board Member Trodrick McCoy.
Here.
Board Member Kashamba Miller Anderson. Board Member Glenn Spiritus.
Here.
Ex officio Board Member Mayor Ronnie Felder. City Manager Jonathan Evans.
Present.
Acting City Clerk Deborah Hall McCullen is present. District Attorney Don Wynn.
Present by phone.
Finance Director Randy Sherman. Mr. Chair, you may proceed.
Thank you. And just to clarify the record, the start time was 5:05 p.m. Moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Board Member Trodrick McCoy. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. Do we have any additions, deletions, or substitutions to the agenda?
None from staff, Mr. Chair.
Disclosures from the board? Motion to adopt agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Madam Clerk?
Board Member McCoy.
Yes.
Board Member Spiritus.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lanier.
Yes.
Chair Lawson.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Mr. Chair,
Board Member Miller Anderson, go ahead.
I guess you didn't hear me say that I was present earlier.
Okay.
Thank you. Let the record reflect Board Member Miller Anderson is present,
And
appearing
my vote,
virtually.
and my vote is yes.
Thank you. We do have two items on consent.
Chair.
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry, Ms. Lanier, Board Member.
I'd like to pull both of those items off of consent.
Okay. 1, 2, there's actually 3 on consent. I'm sorry. Did you want to pull all 3 or just the?
Absolutely.
All 3?
I don't know how we have something on consent for a special meeting.
Yes, all of them, please.
Thank you.
That's, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Evans, explain that, please. Because this is some real trickery. I don't understand how you would put something on consent when we got the agenda within the last hour and expect us to come in and do a blanket approval. And, you know, these are very customary items. Like, these are nothing new. Every time we get a new utility director, I was expecting something that was going to be completely new to us, but I don't understand why it took us a week to get to this point. Mr. Chair, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
I want an
Evans.
explanation because, like, you know, this shouldn't be.
Absolutely. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
A couple of the items that are on the agenda for consideration this evening is the ratification as it relates to appointing someone to.
Mr. Chair, I recall my time. I want an explanation as to why. I don't need to know what it is because these are the same items that we get every time we get a utility director. I'm trying to find out what took us a week and the board members haven't even had the opportunity to read these items. I don't want a regurgitation of what's already stated on the agenda. I want to know what the staff time is in the process. Remember, this is a special emergency meeting. So when we left here a week ago, it was very clear as to what needs to happen. And I don't see anything on here that's completely new that we have not experienced before. So I want an explanation as to what was the process and the delay in time, because I'm not inclined to even support anything on the agenda with the
Agreed.
exception of Global Tech.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member. Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, some of these items are required to facilitate the operations of the utility district. and to facilitate the actions of the board with regards to the separation of the previous director.
So moving forward, we're going to be pulling these from consent, and this will be placed in the regular order on the agenda. We can go into the regular agenda. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Ch- Excuse me, we are on item 2A.
Yes.
Resolution number 017-24UD, a resolution of the Utility Special District Board of Directors of the City of Riviera Beach Utility Special District, Palm Beach County, Florida, authorizing and ratifying the appointment of Stephen Doyle as the acting executive director of the Utility Special District with an effective date of July 24, 2024.
Move to deny.
Second.
Motion to deny has been made and properly seconded. Discussion from the board. Roll call, Madam Clerk. Do we have any public comment cards?
Mr. Chair, we do not have any public comment cards on this item.
Roll call, please.
Board Member Spiritus?
No.
Board Member McCoy?
No.
Board Member,
I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Yes, excuse me. So I'm voting yes to deny the resolution. I apologize.
okay. Vice Chair Lanier?
Yes.
Chair Lawson?
Yes.
The item passes with Board Member Spiritus dissenting.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Miller.
Bill
I'm
Anderson,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Board Member Miller Anderson, I apologize.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. 2B?
Item 2B, resolution number 014-24UD, a resolution of the Utility Special District Board of Directors of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, authorizing the board to appoint the Director of Finance and Administrative Services and appoint the acting executive director as the alternate to the East Central Region Wastewater Treatment Facility Board according to the interlocal agreement signed September 9, 1992, and the renewal of the ECR interlocal agreement signed April 20th, 2010, and providing for an effective date.
Move to deny.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
well, isn't this moot since there is no acting executive director?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Ms. Evans, go ahead.
In the event that the city does not, or the utility district doesn't appoint a member onto the ECR to serve in that particular capacity, realize that the city's interests are not protected and preserved. And invariably, this has financial implications on the district if we are in fact not represented. And so there is specific compositions of that board, and this is a critical board with regards to having some representation. So if it is the board's pleasure to have another person serve in that capacity, it would be staff's recommendation for that name to be proffered so we can at least have persons serve in that capacity. So there's not something that happens that's an adverse impact to the agency.
Follow up, Dr. Spitters. Mr. Evans, follow up to that. When is the next board meeting for the ECR?
Mr. Chair, I'm not 100% sure on that information.
So to that point, it wouldn't be an impact if we don't have any representation, if they don't have a current board meeting scheduled, or if we don't have anything that we're going to miss, because I'm sure we'll have a representative by that time. So I agree that we need to get somebody in place, but as of right now, we need to put the right person in place.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Staff just provided information to me. It's the third Wednesday of the month, every month.
Thank you. Board Member McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can someone explain this memo in the backup that indicates that Mr. Randy Sherman is appointed as the representative?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If I may.
Go ahead.
Most of the conversations associated with the ECR are financial in nature. Usually utility districts are there, utility district directors are there, but they have technical assistance that is provided for. But most of the substantive discussions center around cost and investments that impact the users of the ECR. And so in conversations that I had with Mr. Doyle, he felt comfortable serving in the second role and didn't want to necessarily serve in that principal role, as he didn't have much involvement and much knowledge base on the ECR and how the ECR functions. And Mr. Sherman having the most experience dealing with that particular board, it was determined that he would be the most suitable fit in the interim to serve in that capacity.
Follow-up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I was actually directing that to the chairperson since he penned the letter. Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
so I'm asking, you authored this letter. So what was the intent from your perspective? And while you're doing that, what is the authority that you have as the chairperson of the utility district? Never mind. My next question is to legal and to staff who put this item together. Is you're sitting here, number one, the resolution doesn't even make sense. It says the resolution authorizing the board to appoint the director of finance and administrative services and appoint the acting executive director as the alternate. So two things. Number one, this is dependent that there is an acting executive director, which it isn't. And then secondly, this doesn't even state a specific name. So perhaps it's in the resolution. But even more importantly, we seem to be making these appointments and we haven't been provided with a copy of the interlocal agreement for the ECR, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm literally relying on what seems to be a half-baked resolution and an even more diluted letter that doesn't even give me what the actual authority is. And I think that's very important, as opposed to just sitting here blindly appointing people, because I don't even know what the actual interlocal agreement calls for, which is very interesting because I learned a whole lot of stuff reading at least the one that we've seen at the TPA. So this is not proper in its current form. And certainly if we're going to convene, I believe on the third Wednesday of August, I would like for it to come back with all of the backup items. And this is my concern. We had a whole week and an hour before the meeting, you got stuff in here that nobody can justify. And we have stuff that should be in here that's nowhere to be found. And, I don't know if folks think this is important or not, but this is why we're in the very situation we're in now, where we don't have the proper authorities in place and we have the actual failures. But we're going to be asked, and the board members get maybe an hour that the email was sent notifying us that the agenda had been posted. So at what point do we actually sit down and dive into it? I'm literally just seeing this for the first time, since the meeting started. So I'm going to renew my motion to deny this as well. And I just don't want to make, these kind of decisions and then regret it later because we don't have all of the information. It's like we're being placed in duress. So I just don't think that this is appropriate for us right now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Board Member McCoy. And if we could just go back, because you kind of caught me off guard in reference to the letter that allegedly I penned. And this is actually my first time seeing it when I sat down at this table. So I had no idea about this letter. So I wasn't aware of this letter until our clerk asked me to sign it coming into the meeting. So as your point is clearly stated, I agree. I have not seen this. I don't know what authority this is given. Attorney Nguyen, do I have the authority to sign or clearly ratify this letter?
Mr. Chair, I haven't seen the letter either. I can't answer that. I know that the board has the authority to appoint to the ECR, but I haven't seen the letter.
Attorney Nguyen, before anything comes before this board, city or utility district, I need to make sure legal sufficiency has vetted everything. Because for the board to place a letter in front of me to sign, for my colleague to then address a letter that I haven't seen, because we just got the backup within the last hour, because we understand the condition of our utility district, I'm being questioned by my colleague for a letter that I'm just seeing within the last 32 minutes. This is concerning for me on both sides. So this is why we're in this position now, and I will refuse to agree on appointing an executive director or anybody to our ECR that hasn't been properly vetted or given us the proper information. So I would be in support of my colleague's motion to deny this and putting the right people in place. Additional comments from the board?
Chair,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the manager, is there an agreement between the city and the USD that calls for the USD staff to be employees of the city?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
there is a service agreement between the utility district and the city. For the city provides the personnel for the district to operate.
And there's a agreement between the city and the USD just in general, or is that a part of it?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
that is part of the overall service agreement between both parties.
Could could this board get a copy of that agreement?
We can provide a copy of that, Mr. Chair.
Additional comments from the board?
And I also like to say, I'm sorry, Chair,
Go ahead.
that the attachments and the items that are listed here is basically the same thing we were talking about last week. So I don't know what the difference is. In terms of the assistant director serving as the acting director, no. So yeah, let's keep moving.
Additional comments from the board?
Chair.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans, if the board does not make an appointment for an acting director, will the assistant director still take on that role as the head of the department, or will you fill that role?
Mr.
What
Chair,
happens?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the assistant director is an employee of the city, and so it would be my desires to work with the acting or the assistant director to continue to maintain the operations of both the district and comply with any statutory requirements or any requirements that are provided for in the service agreement and the USD charter, to the best of our abilities, applicable to the health, safety, and welfare of the community.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Go ahead.
I have a problem with that. I don't know if y'all know how serious this is. This is very serious in terms of the water here in the city. And who runs that is very important to the people who live here, to the people who drink this water. So to come to the meeting and have the same conversation that we had last meeting is beyond me. There needed to have been some resolution to the director, assistant director of that department today, and a alternative to that. Because what's happening is that we're just basically revisiting the meeting from last week. This is very important. This is like everything that the city has going on. This is what is most important. This utility district is what is most important. So whatever else is going on, and I understand people's plates are full, but this is what is most important here. And it seems that we keep fumbling how we're moving forward with this. We need to have somebody in that district that knows what they're doing, can do the job, and I recommend outside assistance, because what's been happening hasn't been working.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on. You done, Board Member Lanier?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Board Member Spiritus.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, I think at the last meeting, I made a recommendation to the board and to the city manager to bring in an outside consulting firm to assist in running the day-to-day operations of the water plant, and to make recommendations on the new plant. I think that's before us in the
Mr. Chair,
future.
Germanity, that's not before us right now.
We still have to dispose of this one, Dr. Spiritus.
And no, I understand, but I'm just responding to my colleagues' comments about there not being anything being done right now. So I'm just clarifying that from what I can see on the agenda, it looks like some of the items that we've been waiting for and hoping for are on the agenda for future discussion.
Okay. So we will go ahead and find, if we have no more discussion about ECR, Board Member Miller Anderson, any comments?
No, just want to know if you can just repeat the motion.
Motion to deny was made by Board Member McCoy, seconded by Board Member Lanier.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Additional comments? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Board Member Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member McCoy,
Yes.
Board Member Spiritus,
No.
Vice Chair Lanier,
Yes.
Chair Lawson, passes with Board Member Spiritus dissenting.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Councilman, Board Member Spiritus, if I can. I'm not sure what information you have, or if you know something that we don't know, but I don't know how we can sit here and blindly appoint to a board where no one in here can actually attest to or provide what the actual functions is of the ECR and explain what the interlocal agreement is as far as the convention, what the voting authority is. So, you know, I'm seeing this tonight for the first time, and if you were privy to information that we weren't, I would, like to know, because it's not fair that we have to be in this situation. It's already a disappointing situation to deal with in the first place, but I don't know, and I just, in the spirit of compromise, I'm trying to figure out, am I missing something? Because you're seemingly suggesting we should appoint him, and I'm saying we don't even know the convention of the board. Or here's what the alternative I was going to suggest. Perhaps, and if there's nothing that actually excludes it, there's nothing, in my opinion, that would eliminate one of the sitting board members here from being appointed there and receiving technical assistance from staff. But I don't understand what exactly is the requirement of the ECR. And for us to make that decision blindly, unless you have some information that we don't, I just, am a little lost as how you can support something when we don't even have the fundamental backups to say what the actual function of that ECR appointee is. And I think it's even more critical now that we closely examine these, because what we thought we had in place in terms of oversight, has failed, tremendously, certainly in the last year or 13 months, if you will.
And thank you, Board Member McCoy, but twofold. I believe that we would save those for statements by the mayor and the board to have that discussion, because we want to get through the business of the city, of the utility district, one, and then two, I don't want us to get into the business of justifying or clarifying our vote and decision as a board. If that is our board member's decision to vote in that aspect, he has the authority to either verify, justify, or explain his stance. And I know you want to get an opinion from him, but I do want to get through the agenda, and then we could have this discussion during general comments.
Mr. Chair, I think I'd like to respond right now.
Go ahead,
rather
board
than
member.
wait.
You have the authority. Go, of course.
First of all, with respect to the interim director, I wanted to have an opportunity to speak to Mr. Doyle and vet him one-on-one. I wasn't going to go right ahead and vote to approve him. I wanted to have the opportunity to have discussion, to have him sit here before us and explain his qualifications and what he expected to do and what he has done as the assistant director. I wasn't saying that I was voting for him. I was just wanting to have the opportunity to keep the motion going so we can get to that point and make some decisions. That's number one. Number two, clearly we have to have someone representing us at the board. So to put somebody in there interim, as I said, the motion itself is moot, has to be amended, because clearly we don't have an interim executive director, as I said originally. But I think that it's important for us to have someone at the meetings, even if it's temporary and we replace that person. It's important for us to have someone representing the city at the meetings. That's my motive. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Board member McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, board member, for indulging me. And the very thing that you mentioned is the reason why I'm asking. If we need someone, my question is, what would prevent one of the existing utility district directors, meaning us as the board of directors, from being on there? So certainly that's why I wanted to know if this was something that could have been done through the temporary or interim appointment of one of the five of us. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you. So to that point, Mr. Chair, I would ask staff if they could share also the interlocal agreement with the utility district board, because that's not on the UD's website. I do see the charter, but I don't see the interlocal agreement for the ECR.
Mr. Evans?
Chair, we can provide that.
Thank you.
Item 2C, resolution number 015-24UD, a resolution of the utility special district.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. What, did we dispose of this item, number 2B?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, resolution number 015, excuse me, dash 24UD, a resolution of the Utility Special District Board of Directors of the City of Riviera Beach Special Utility District, Palm Beach County, Florida, authorizing and ratifying the termination of Michael R.T. Lowe as the Executive Director of the Utility Special District with an effective date of July 24, 2024. Mr. Chair, we do have two public comment cards in this item. The acceptance of public comment cards on this item is now closed.
Move to deny this resolution.
Motion to deny. Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of second. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is a resolution that effectuates the actions contemplated by the board or acted upon the board at the last utility district meeting, whereby they removed Mr. Lowe as a member or an officer of the utility district. This consummates the separation of employment between the district and Mr. Lowe, and this is the corresponding resolution for your consideration.
Discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So, want to point out just a couple things. Number one, I'm looking at the resolution. It has me listed as the vice chair. I don't think that's me. So I would ask that when this is executed, that portion is corrected. Secondly, I don't see that the city or utility district attorney has signed off on this for legal sufficiency. Ms. Nguyen, can we hear from you on this?
Yes, good evening. I did approve the item in the peak agenda approval system.
One more time, please.
I said I did approve the item in the peak agenda approval system. If you all approve it, it will probably be sent to me by the clerk through DocuSign. I don't always sign the hard copy. I don't sign the hard copies until after you have taken action on an item.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Go ahead, board member.
So, Ms. Nguyen, you approving it through the peak system. I'm not sure what that means because I'm speaking of in terms of legal sufficiency. I mean, that's an agenda processing software. I'm speaking, did you ratify this or did you review this for legal sufficiency?
I did review the resolution, yes.
Okay, so I appreciate you answering that. I'm looking through the charter and I'm looking at all 23 pages of it. Under what authority do we have to actually terminate this? Or should I ask Ms. Tennille DeCoste to explain this because it's not in our charter?
I think I can take a stab at it. You're not terminating Mr. Lowe, you're ratifying the manager's termination of Mr. Lowe. So the resolution reads that you're authorizing and ratifying the termination. Once you do that, then, the manager will actually send the termination letter from the manager, not from the utility district board. In the past, you have authorized the, I believe, hiring of when Jimmy Johnson was the director.
Right. So here's
Because remember, the utility district charter has a delegation of authority, and you all have not delegated that authority to the manager. You all kept that authority. The only authority you gave the manager was the authority to supervise. And so, and I believe in the past, and why you haven't seen this before, is that all of your other directors that have left the agency, I believe, and Mr. Evans can correct me if I'm wrong, have resigned. And so there was no need to bring authorization or ratification to you for termination.
follow up.
Go ahead.
Well, Ms. Nguyen, I'm trying to internalize it. If you could just kind of make sure. I don't understand what ratifying the termination. I think the action that we took on the 17th is very much clear. We removed him and relieved him from his duties as the executive director, seeing the day-to-day operations. I'm not agreeing with terminating anyone because it seems that he is an employee of the city. This is not within our purview. Certainly we can agree, but we made it very clear on the 17th that he was relieved of duty. He still is an employee of the city. So I don't understand what we need to come back and now authorize a resolution that includes the words authorizing and ratifying the termination. That's not our authority. Our charter doesn't give us the authority to ratify or terminate Mr. Lowe.
Your charter doesn't speak to a lot of things. However, it does have the delegation of duty. And it just seemed to flow that if in the past you have authorized the hiring, that you would authorize and ratify a termination.
But we're
If you
not
don't
terminating
want
him,
to-
Ms. Nguyen, and that's why I don't want the board to get
Well-
confused. Because it seems that you guys are looking for cover. We relieved him of his duty. He still is employed with the city, but he's not running the day-to-day operations.
Board member, I'm sorry. Can we please mute our phones? Thank you.
When we
Go ahead,
make
Board member.
motions on the floor, we don't come back at the following meeting to ratify with an actual written resolution. It's seemingly someone's asking us to give them cover for them in their separation with Mr. Lowe. I think our resolution or our motion that was made on the 17th was very clear in motions as called out in the charter, and perhaps I should probably pull that up so we can be for certain, doesn't require that we actually reduce it to a resolution, Ms. Nguyen. And I don't feel comfortable with doing this, and the board should be very cautious about it because apparently, for whatever reason, unless, Ms. Nguyen, are you suggesting what we did on the 17th is not sufficient?
I'm not, my question on the
Okay, well, I
17th.
recall, listen, if you're not, that's it. We don't need to do this. I don't want to give someone cover to say, well, I didn't fire Mr. Lowe, the board did. No, we removed him of his duty. Mr. Evans, that's your responsibility because, I don't like the way this whole thing is set up anyways. So I think, members, you better be very careful. My vote is not going to be to support this item. And clearly, Ms. Nguyen already explained that what we did on the 17th was sufficient. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Mr. Evans, clearly the board has the authority to remove the executive director of the district from the day-to-day operations of the utility district. But he is still an employee of the city, as my colleague said. Mr. Evans, did you ask the former director if he would stay on in a different role?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
I didn't get into the specificities with the director to stay on in an additional role, and I would like to provide some clarity. When the board voted 4-0 to effectively relieve Mr. Lowe of his duties, it was my opinion that at that point, the board effectively exercised its authority that it invariably wanted to move the district in another direction. And so I didn't want to circumvent what the board's actual desires are by unilaterally placing someone in another position that doesn't exist in the organization to facilitate whatever activities we would ask for. And so to get back to this resolution and the resolution that provided the supervision of the district director to the administrator, it doesn't say a situation whereby the manager has the authority to hire and fire. It is, as it relates to in the city charter, that the manager just does have the ability to hire and fire all employees. And so one of the things that I would tell the board too is we can't commingle the charter and the authorities in the charter in the district when it is convenient to whatever the argument is. If we are going to say the charter supersedes what the district is, then it's clear as day that the manager has the ability to effectuate the separation. But if it's a situation where if I would have made a different decision from the board, it then would call into question, why did I make that decision when the board made it explicitly clear by its action that they wanted to move in another direction?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Ms. Nguyen, so clearly we have the authority to remove the executive director from the day-to-day operations, but we don't have the authority to hire or fire the executive director. Is that correct?
I don't believe that that's correct. You have a charter that says that you have a certain duty and you have not delegated that duty. The only duty you've delegated as it relates to the executive director is in the resolution that you entered into back in 2019 that said you delegate your authority to the manager to supervise the executive director. And it was limited to supervision.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the appointment also came before the board as well for the purposes of the selection of Mr. Lowe.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So then, Ms. Nguyen, it's your opinion, your legal opinion, that the board has the authority to hire and fire the executive director of the utility district.
Yes, you have not delegated that authority.
Okay, so then our resolution probably was wrong at the last meeting. We probably, instead of removing him from his day-to-day operations, we probably should have just removed him from the
I don't know
utility
that it was
district.
wrong. You have the authority to do what it is you would like to do. You could, in removing him, maybe it was the intent of the board to have him function in another capacity and not be terminated.
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Board Member McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at that section, Ms. Nguyen, and it says specifically 5.01 delegation of duties. Nothing contained herein shall be deemed to authorize the unauthorized delegation of any of the constitutional or statutory duties of the state or the city or any officers thereof. So, Ms. Nguyen, you're saying that we had the ability to delegate our authority to the managers to supervise him, but we
You did do
can.
that. I'm sorry. You did do that.
I'm sorry.
You delegated your authority to the manager to supervise the director.
Okay. So absent of that delegation, which this says we can't do it, you're saying we did it anyways.
You can delegate whatever authority you like to delegate as a council, and that's what you did. I'm not saying you can't delegate. I'm saying you haven't.
But you just said we delegated our authority for him to be supervised. Did you not?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
and you have the authority to do that. You can delegate whatever you like.
Okay. So
I cannot recall the conversation in 2019 because I thought that the manager asked for something else as well, and you all only gave him the authority to supervise.
okay. So in the same fashion, because I can recall, and I shared this with you, that I was the lone person that did not want the manager to supervise my employee. And to that point, right, it would seem to me that I am one of the officers of the utility district and I don't have to have that authority delegated because I particularly hold that authority, right, Ms. Nguyen, when it refers
You
to officers?
Yes, but you all delegate as a board.
Right,
Not, you
but
don't act individually.
it said officers. It didn't refer to us as the board because if you look in the charter from the statutory construction, when it is intended for it to be the board, they explicitly say the board. But this
Mhm.
section calls out officers. So I just want to make
Because,
sure,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I want to make sure that I'm getting it right.
Mhm. For instance, right now, you're speaking as a board member and an officer. However, when you all act collectively, you act as a board. One officer can't act on behalf of the board.
See, and this is where it gets very confusing, right, Ms. Nguyen? Because now if you got a Riviera Beach charter issue that says you can't give direction, and I'm looking at the utility district charter, which says I actually can and do
Mhm.
have the authority, and that can't be delegated away, you have a real conflict here, Ms. Nguyen. And in the same fashion that you say the board seemingly delegated, which I would submit to you, I did not, and I will remind you of the settlement the city entered into, which acknowledged that. Ms. Nguyen, did you look back at that?
I looked at some of it, but not as it relates to this issue.
Well,
But yeah, that's been top of mind for me. Um,
but Ms. Nguyen, the city conceded to that point that you guys did not have the authority under the charter. So now we're getting back in circles. This is why I don't want to do this, members. Apparently, Mr. Evans, that's his problem. He's a city employee. Mr. Lowe's a city employee. I would ask that you really consider not doing that because we made our vote clear as to our expectations.
Chair.
Go ahead.
Um, motion, and I'm for this motion because the executive director in July of 2023 received a letter from the Department of Health telling him that that was E. coli, that the samples were not done properly, told him this in a letter. City administration did not know this until the end of the year, 7 months later. Then, once that was discovered, he refused to meet with the Department of Health to even rectify the situation or was very reluctant to. So, no, I have no confidence in him anywhere in the city. So, what we need to do is we can vote on this item. And if you don't want to vote on it or you don't want to do it, then you can vote that way. But to have a situation where we have a director that refuses to divulge information, not just to his superiors, but to us. So, no, I can't have any confidence in his abilities anywhere because that kind of deception is something that I cannot approve of. So we can take the vote.
Additional comments from the board? Madam Clerk, do we have public comment cards?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have two public comment cards on this item.
Go ahead.
Scott Lewis, followed by Cindy March.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott Lewis. Um, I just, I manage 45 people full time. I've done it 48 years in my business. I have never, ever, ever witnessed what happened here last week in terms of allowing an employee to be grilled and humiliated for 3 hours. Now, I'm not holding you all specifically at fault. What I'm looking at is over here at management. All right. I wouldn't want to work for this city if I had someone above me that wouldn't protect me and at least say, let's take a pause. Let me go out with Mr. Lowe and talk with him. Let me pull my employee aside before I destroy the other employees' morale in this city, rather than letting them sit here and get cremated for 3 hours. I can't believe he took 3 hours. Not that I don't think he should be terminated. But the problem I've got is there was a supervisor over him. Did he hide that Department of Health letter from him in July of last year? Did Mr. Evans know? Who knew? I haven't seen anybody get disciplined except Mr. Lowe last week. 13 months. I had shit in my water. It was covered up by the staff and nothing has happened. That is not acceptable. You all have to take leadership role. Please take a leadership role. I read the mayor's report, skimmed it about this toxic world environment and the girl power. You know, it comes down to management of employees. And that's what I'm standing up here talking about, because that's a real problem. Right? This board needs to take that role and take it over. Please, we elected you. We didn't elect your staff. Right? You have to do something. You know, I hear that 1 hour before the meeting, all this information dropped on you. Whose fault is that? All right? You guys need to start taking control of your director, your manager, because everything he likes to do, we just spend the money and go. Believe him, sign off. Hell with it. Hell with the citizens that got to drink crap in their water. That doesn't matter. You can give us lip service, tell it's the most important thing. But the most important thing I've seen is the 3 bonds. I don't care about a castle for firefighters or policemen. I care about what I drink in my water first. Priority. Nothing is more important than that. Please do something. You know, hire an internal auditor to start monitoring this. I never have gotten over the coincidence of the auditor quitting and then a month later, all this shit hit the fan in my water. And for 13 months, it's been covered up. And there hasn't been an audit of what's going on with all this bond getting pushed and our tax money at work. Thank you. Do something.
Thank you for your comments.
Cindy March.
Good evening, Council. Cindy March. I am so confused. You know why? Because this man took the rap. Jonathan Evans has too many jobs. That's number one. And we voted you all into office. Y'all can play this political role by a vote and talking about clean water. We don't have clean water. This man shouldn't have the only one been responsible for leaving here. And let me make myself very clear, because something I'm missing. This man was not terminated. This man quit. So y'all need to change that terminology, because a lawsuit could come behind that. Now, you did put on the floor after this man quit, and even his assistant said, if he go, I'm going. So who brought him back here? So a phone call was made the next day by Jonathan Evans to get the assistant back here. I remember I was disorderly last week when he said he was going to leave. And Jonathan Evans said, well, I give the assistant a call. And I blurted out, I don't know what you're calling him for, because he said, if this man leaves, he's leaving with him. Now he's back on this board. Are you serious? Deidre Jacobs had no business over the utility district. She don't have no engineer license. Jonathan Evans, Jacobs need to go, and Sherman definitely needs to go because he had to write the check for the fine. So he knew. Let me tell you something. If you're not going to be honest to yourself. Be honest to the people that put you all in office. Understand your charter. When the last time y'all charter been updated? Because evidently some of you all don't even read the charter. I thank God for Project McCoy. He reads the charter. He knows the charter. Is he always right? I can't answer that. I'm not going to judge him. But Lanier, I remember when Jonathan Evans came back, oh, let's just make him the district this. He has too many jobs. It's time for Jonathan Evans, Jacobs, and Sherman to leave here because this is too serious now. Too many people. When I knocked on them doors for votes, they were saying they had skin rashes. They had to go to the doctor. It might not have happened to you, but if y'all use them two letters, what if it was me? You'll do better. When you know better, you'll do better. Evans needs to go because they're covering up for him. If you don't do nothing unethical for Evans, you out the door. Point blank, simple as that.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, that's the end of public comment for this item.
Additional comments from the board?
Chair.
Go ahead, Board Member McCoy.
So, Mr. Chair, I want to go back to where I was before in terms of the authority and delegation. Ms. Nguyen, I want to read this off to you, and perhaps this may actually jog your memory, but it was actually Michael Lowe who actually executed this on behalf of the utility district. But this, members, I can certainly share this with you. But this is actually the settlement agreement in which he executed back March 10th, 2022. And Troderick McCoy and Michael Lowe. So I'll read it to you. And I think this will probably resolve everything that we're talking about as to whether we have the authority. And this actually answers, I think, one of the questions Board Member Lanier actually brought up. And I'm only read the pertinent parts. The parties agree, and the parties being Troderick McCoy as the plaintiff, the City of Riviera Beach Utilities Special District. The parties agree that the Riviera Beach Utility District Charter allows the district board to enter into a utility service agreement with the City of Riviera Beach to provide employees for operational and administrative services. The parties agree that the utility director shall be provided by the City of Riviera Beach to oversee the utility district's operations, and the city manager of the City of Riviera Beach will be provided by the City of Riviera Beach to oversee the administrative functions of the utility district. Both positions will report to the board. The parties agree that the Riviera Beach Utility District shall amend the current utility services agreement with the City of Riviera Beach to include the city manager as an employee to the Riviera Beach Utility District in the capacity as the director of the Riviera Beach Utility District for administrative services. The parties agree that the Riviera Beach Utility District shall amend the current users utility services agreement with the City of Riviera Beach to include the utility director as a director of the Riviera Beach Utility District for operational services. The parties agree that the utility district as an employee of the City of Riviera Beach shall report to the city manager and to the Riviera Beach Utility District Board upon request. I'm not sure exactly why you're looking, Ms. Nguyen, for us to ratify any sort of termination when it's unexplicitly clear. Mr. Lowe even agrees, and he executed this on March 10th, 2022, that he has and always was an employee of the utility district, that he was here in an operational role, but at all times he was a Riviera Beach employee. So I think I would ask that you really reconsider this because there is no reason that we need to do anything more than we've already done. He's been relieved of operational control. That's it. but I'm not sitting here and she said the exact words that I was thinking and I didn't want to say it. I don't want to set us up to be sued as personal officers because Mr. Lowe has already acknowledged that he has and always was an employee of the utility district. So for us to now go back and ratify saying that we ratify termination, we're now involving or injecting ourselves back into something that we don't even have the authority. And Mr. Lowe actually agreed. So Ms. Nguyen, I would certainly ask you to read paragraphs 5 through 7, or actually a little more than that, 5 through 9 of the executed March 10th, 2022 settlement agreement. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you. Go ahead, Board Member Spiritus.
right, I don't believe I can make a motion right now because I believe there's a motion on the floor, but I think we should consider getting a legal opinion before we move forward one way or another on this action. I think council needs some time to review this, and I think we don't want to make any missteps that might come back to us in legal action.
And to that point, Attorney Nguyen, do you need more time to make your legal opinion, or have you reviewed this for legal sufficiency?
I would like more time, please. I
Okay.
appreciate the offer.
I would be in agreement, and I would take the advice of Attorney Nguyen, if my colleagues would also take that into consideration. There's a motion on the floor and seconded.
I'm ready for you to vote, but I just want to read this last position, and I think this would probably absolve us of any liabilities, at least certainly me, because I'm one of the executors on the agreement. The parties agree that each party represent and warrants to the other that all the necessary authorizations have been given by all required persons or entities, and all other actions necessary to the execution of this settlement agreement has been taken, that entry into this settlement agreement is duly authorized, and that this settlement agreement is a valid and binding agreement of the parties. So I don't think that, well, whatever. Mr. Lowe, best to you, sir. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
so I think I have the ability to remove my second before we vote. Is that correct,
You do.
City Clerk?
Yes, that is correct.
So I would like to remove my second.
So there's a motion on the floor. Does your motion on the floor, Council Board Member Lanier, still stand?
Yes.
Do we have a second? Ms. Miller Anderson? We're on
Mr. Chair,
item 2C. There's been, a motion's been made, but no second is currently on the floor to approve Resolution 015-24.
well, being that Ms. Nguyen said that she wanted some additional time, then I'm fine with allowing her to do that.
Okay. So there's a motion with no second. Motion dies for lack of a second. Attorney Nguyen, go ahead, Board Member McCoy.
Well, I want to close this out. Can I move to deny Resolution 15-24 UD?
Motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Surely there has to be a second, members, because staff took a whole entire week. Ms. Nguyen says she approved this in the peak system. So I don't know exactly what exact time they needed. I mean, I got an email about them having to work out of a different location, but certainly they knew this was coming. We didn't. We had an hour, and I just sat here and figured this out in a matter of 20 minutes. So you don't have to support it. I'm just, I got legal insulation. So good luck to y'all.
Thank you. Motion dies for lack of second. Attorney Nguyen, when will you be bringing this back before us?
I would think at the next utility district meeting, Mr. Evans and the board, does that sound reasonable? I mean, if we don't need to bring it back, then we won't. Is that the understanding as well?
That is the understanding. Okay. Additional comments? Item 7A.
Item 7A, excuse me, 7A, Resolution 10-24 UD, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Riviera Beach Utility Special District, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving a proposal from Global Tech to perform engineering, design, and construction services for the raw water wells and transmission system as needed to upgrade the systems to meet the requirements necessary for the new water treatment facility, piggybacking a Palm Beach County contract awarded to Global Tech, and authorizing the Utility Special District Finance Director to make payments from project number 23039 in an amount not to exceed $4,883,045.74 and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do not have any public comment cards for this item. The acceptance of the cards is now closed.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, if I can have the Assistant Director of the Utility District, Mr. Stephen Lowe, to make this presentation. This is pursuant to the discussion that we had with the board concerning the opportunity to effectuate emergency authorization for a piggyback solicitation for Global Tech Services to provide design and engineering services to address some of the challenges with regards to the wells. Assistant Director Doyle has had the opportunity to look over the agreements, as well as procurement has signed off and provided the appropriate emergency authorizations to proceed. And Mr. Doyle can provide greater specificities on the matter. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Welcome, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, board members, city manager, assistant city manager, and city attorney. This was brought last week, by the way, as you recall, as far as the dire need to actually make improvements to our well systems. This is, ooh, is it on? Is it on?
Yes.
So, sorry about that. Yeah, it was brought in last week. I believe the board had several questions that want to be addressed. I'm going to probably do a quick recap as far as what the need is. Right now, we're looking to piggyback a contract with Palm Beach County using Global Tech as the prime to be able to go in and tackle several of our wells that have immediate need for improvements. So we specifically listed certain wells that are that are out there. Namely, I guess our Western well field has 5 wells that we want to tackle because those are the wells that have the most dire need. So I did explain in the memo as far as where we stand with our overall well system, just a quick recap. And I do want, so.
Mr. Chair, if
Go
I
ahead.
can interrupt, Mr. Doyle. So thank you for being thorough, but I'm going to ask if you could kind of explain a little bit more, because I did not see the memo and I was trying to deal with the first 3 items. So, and this is actually really good, I think, where you're going, because I was going to ask that you give me something that's more specific about our wells as opposed to doing a specific blanket piggyback from the county. But I have not read your memo yet.
Okay.
So if you could just make sure you kind of go into what that means.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will. We have a total of 27 wells. So we generally call the wells the Eastern well field. If I had to say general perspective, and I don't want to be specific locations, but we have wells throughout the city. There's ones that are east of the railroad tracks and ones that are further out west towards Gramercy Park. So out of the 27 wells, 9 of the wells, by the way, are out of service for various reasons, whether it's mechanical failure, electrical shorts, water quality issues, by the way, just generally speaking, that you have degradation within the well, degradation within the pump. So out of the 9, by the way, we have lost 9 that are specifically out of service. So the next 9, by the way, is what I refer to as diminished capacity. And because I've been analyzing it over time, that given, let's say, for example, that the well was rated at 600 gallons a minute, and now it's only doing 50% of that. It's down to 300 gallons a minute. So now the next series of wells, there's 9 of them that have diminished capacity that are in the range of losing half their capacity. So that's now putting a burden on the remaining 9 wells that are now actually carrying the load. And in some cases, there's 1 or 2 that are going over 100%. So now the wells in general, by the way, they vary all over the city from certain depths of 250 feet to as shallow as like 110. So, and it's the formation across the city is a little unusual. The eastern well field, the ones that are closest to just city, city hall, are relatively deep or deeper than the most. The ones out west are shallow, and they have to be managed. And each of the well fields has to be managed in such a way that we're supposed to not draw too much from the aquifer. For example, 3 wells in a row, you would use the ones on the outside first, then alternate the other well in the middle so that the formation has a chance to recover. So So looking at the analysis, we looked at what's causing some of the problems, and we've had well drillers that are in there. Now, like I said, well maintenance contractors have been into the wells. In some cases, they're just old and they're starting to get compacted. Others cleaned. It's typical, by the way, to have a well acidized and cleaned and scrubbed every 4 or 5 years if you could get in there. And that's what we have. We have a series of wells all over that because they're carrying the load, you can't take them out of service to be even to bring them back up to par. So that's why I gave numbers, but basically what's happening in the last couple of months, we've had contractors in there doing cleaning and trying to maintain them, and it's not been working. So at that point, this heat wave, in fact, I think we hit 102 today when I walked out of my office. That heat wave is putting a huge burden on the water supply just in general, forgetting about what normally happens on a day-to-day. You have people irrigating because they don't want the lawns to be brown. So of course you have that burden, the added burden that's being put onto the aquifer, plus the domestic, plus the fire. So that all is adding up, and we've been buying water from Seacoast Utilities to make up the difference because we're that close between trying to sustain ourselves on a daily basis with this heat wave, and then taking another million gallons a day from Seacoast Utilities to make up the difference to sustain us. Now, we do have storage in the tank, so we can attenuate some of that flow, that demand, but we're heavily relied upon, to be honest with you, our neighbors as a backup. I mean, just thankfully Seacoast is there. We have good friends to the north. So I could get into numbers, Mr. McCoy. I said I did present it as far as the actual gallons per minute, but I think basically what we're looking at is how do we, I've had local well drillers who are not doing sufficient cleaning to be able to restore these wells to original condition. And on top of that, because it's not just the well, we have old piping above that we're trying to work through as we transition to the new plant. Some of these wells will be fully restored and will be used and utilized at the new RO and nano plant. So the advantage is how do you get it? You got to get in there. Well, it didn't work using locals. Ergo, we then decided at this point that we need the assistance of a different level of well drilling operations. People who specifically go in and clean and scrub the wells, can rebuild it. And we're not talking, it's going to cost money. We're talking in some cases stainless steel piping, flow meters, SCADA systems so that we can manage the wells remote, things of that nature. So that's where, if Mr. McCoy, if I gave you a general overview, by the way, I could even get more specifics at a later date, but I hope that gives us like a general overview.
Thank you. Board Member McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Doyle, that's more than I actually was hoping for, but I'm glad you did explain it. But two things. So I'm looking at your memo, and again, please help me and bear with me because we just seen these a little while ago. You seem to reference in your memo the procedures called out, and actually it's even in your subject line, emergency procurement requests.
Mhm.
So here's what I was thinking, right? When I was looking at, and I actually did download the voluminous solicitation for Palm Beach County and also the response from Global Tech. So if you, I should say, as the Assistant Executive Director of the Utility District are invoking or recommending that we invoke Section 15 or 16-5-6 of our code, declaring that it's an emergency, why shouldn't we be using our own actual contractual agreement with Global Tech instead of piggybacking?
I believe, by the way, having consulted with purchasing plus the attorney's office, that I didn't think we could because the current Global Tech contract was for the water plant. And the impression I received was that we could not piggyback that because it had expired. So, and that the only way it could use Global Tech was to piggyback Palm Beach County.
I recall, hold on.
Chair.
But if it's an emergency, then we actually can go outside of that contract. That's what I'm saying. If we're using the emergency procurement procedures called out 16.5, the contract doesn't matter that's expired. Ms. Nguyen, are you with us?
I'm here.
So I want to understand, and I'm asking Mr. Doyle for why wouldn't we do our own contract or our own agreement with Global Tech if this is already being suggested that we're in emergency circumstances or emergency procurement?
I don't know that procurement looked at that. And I'm not sure Ms. Boynton is on.
Well, I want to know because it doesn't matter if we go through, well, actually, it does matter. I would much rather that we do our own because the county agreement is specific to the county's needs. When they put out that request or invitation for, to negotiate invitation for bids, it was based off of the county's current wells. If we're in an emergency situation, can we take the agreement framework and create our own agreement? Because I do not like the county's SBE percentage compared to the percentage that's offered in Riviera Beach. And I asked this question, and I was hoping someone was going to come back with an answer regarding this. So I would much rather use 15% SBEs that's registered with Riviera Beach as opposed to 25% that's registered with the county if we can tailor our agreement in Riviera Beach because of our needs as opposed to the county's needs. So, Ms. Boynton,
Ms. Boynton, are you there?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Chair, council. Yes, we can proceed with entering into our own agreement under the emergency procurement. Based on previous conversations that we had, I think the idea was not to alter the agenda item that was presented last week. So that would be the normal course of action when you're dealing with an emergency procurement. You would get approval to utilize or obtain the services or the goods that you need to address the immediate need, and then go ahead and proceed with obtaining those services, where it be by a proposal or entering into an agreement with said firm or vendor as needed. So yes, we should be able to move forward with entering into our own agreement with Global Tech, foregoing piggybacking Palm Beach County's contract.
So with everything you said, you're saying, yes, we can go forward with moving into our own agreement with Global Tech.
Yes, we can.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr.
And this is a question from procurement. If we effectively were to consider that as a viable option, that means we then have to now spend the time to spin up and draft up another contract and go through a legal review process that invariably will result in some delays. And so I'm not saying that it's not an option for us, but the immediacy is now concerning the wells. And so if it is something that the board has concerns or trepidations, then my recommendation would be to reduce the amount that is authorized in this document, in this agreement, to the tune of about $1 million or 1.3. I think one well costs about 1.3. We can then have some time to then come back with an agreement that effectively accomplishes what the board's desires are. But I've had a couple of conversations with Director Doyle, and the sense of urgency is imminent, and we don't want to delay as it relates to contracts and an agreement. So if there is a desire from the board to move in that fashion, then staff's recommendation would be to modify the amount that's on the agenda for this evening.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Doyle, go ahead, please.
I really like the idea of having our own contract. What I'd like to do is actually piggyback the unit prices on the Palm Beach County one. It offers me a way of control. I don't know, it's the best way I could think of to actually to see how the unit prices work out, because that's how we want to monitor them. And it also gives a QA/QC on keeping them in line. I mean, that way we're not progressing too far. It could go either way. We did look into the issue regarding the SBE requirements of Palm Beach County, and it's at 24%. And I did understand what you were trying to do last time, and we all fully agree, by the way. That contract, by the way, the way it looks and reads, you have to look at piggybacking as a form of actually just replacing the name Palm Beach County with City of Riviera Beach Utilities. That means we would have to hold 24% SBE. The only difference would be when you get into the actual minor, like what percentage within each one, that would be our rules, not theirs. So, and for example, insurance. I mean, if it's contract that provides $1 million insurance, well, you're not going to provide insurance for Palm Beach County for one of our projects. It's going to be insurance to cover the Riviera Beach, for bonds and insurance of that nature. So I think we could use this one if we wanted, but But I think if we could move forward quickly, you have the two options. I know Mr. Evans had said, give us a piece of money so we can move forward and move on a couple of these wells right away. That's one option. The other one is to say, change I don't know how to call it, the front end of the document, that it's ours, but that the back of the document be that it's the unit prices we've established and monitored. And this board also, the contractor who is here today, he was willing to do the same 24% using us.
Board Member McCoy, go ahead.
I have that listed as a hash mark next to the Global Tech rep. And what you're saying is great, but I don't think that you can piggyback just for the purposes of unit price. You have to grab the whole entire agreement. So, I like the idea if you want to put the front cover of Riviera Beach and then, kind of continue with the same unit prices and put ours together. I mean, and I'm going back to last week, and I heard Director Lowe say that he's been out of agreement with engineering since last year, and
Yes.
with Global Tech since last year, right?
I know for sure the engineering from last year, but I think the Global Tech one he was still working on the plant up to about a month ago. So, but that means that agreement could have expired, but the PO could still have been active because they had to wrap up the sand filters. But I think we could go, that's exactly what I'm looking to do, by the way. If I heard everything, I could use our front end with that unit pricing because we've established a reasonable price. And the only question is, can we move forward with the total amount, or can we move with a reduced amount in order to move forward? So.
I like that. I don't want to compromise or delay or further impact the operations, but I can tell you, I'd much rather have 15% of SBEs that's registered with Riviera Beach than to go with the 24% of the entire universe of vendors that the county uses, which may not even amount to 0.5% of the people
Of the local.
of the locals.
Mm-hmm.
And we're spending millions of dollars in bringing our utility well fields up to date, and none of the very locals that are in this community benefit from it. But I'm not going to compromise our water quality for the purposes of getting, making sure that our SBEs and we follow our code. But certainly, I think, and I don't know if this needs to occur, but if we're talking about invoking that provision, does there need to be a declaration of there's an emergency? Or how does that go about being established?
That would be up to Ms.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Hold on. Dr. Spiritus?
I spoke to council earlier today. As you know, I asked for this item to be tabled until this meeting, until we had legal counsel opinion on whether we could piggyback or not.
Mm-hmm.
Council realized what I realized, and yes, an emergency was not declared, therefore you could not piggyback. And she claimed that you had signed the documents, or the city manager signed the documents today to institute an emergency action pertaining to this item. So I think that we've met those requirements. I do agree with my colleague. I'd rather see 15% from Riviera Beach than 24% from the global environment of Palm Beach County. But I would like to just be a little bit more transparent. I see that we have Nigel Grace here. I had a conversation, a briefing today on this meeting, and there are some things that really should be brought out into the open with reference to why these wells are so important and why they have to be done. I believe we have our water plant under construction right now. My previous meeting with Mr. Lowe stated that he was going for an additional filter system on a membrane plant. And remember, I brought up last time, I don't understand why we're putting a filter system on a membrane plant when a membrane plant is supposed to be the filter. So it was a little confusing to me, but I did receive, of course, Mr. Lowe did mention, of course, that you have iron, and we, of course, we have iron in New York all the time in the water, but there are other particles as well. And I understand from my briefing and my conversations, and I know that Mr. Grace is here, and Mr. Doyle may be able to speak to this, but apparently we've done some tests with different filter systems, and nothing has been successful at this point in taking out those particles. So we may be building and planning a $300 million plant that will not work. Apparently, we have to go down. The aquifer itself has salt water in it. We know that it's ancient salt water in that aquifer, from my understanding. It's not salt water intrusion coming from another area. And there's some obviously decay and infiltration of particles all around the wells. So the odds are that it's not just 4 wells that need to be worked on. Probably all 27 or pretty close to it are going to have to be either rebuilt or replaced. So this is a good start. We have to start somewhere. This should have been done probably 3 years ago, 6 years ago, 20 years ago. We should have been looking into all of these things. But we're here where we are right now, and we have to move forward. So clearly, I support moving forward with this, but I am very, very concerned about planning and designing a new plant that may not be compatible with the aquifer that we're dealing with right now, and we can't go to any other aquifer. My understanding, I know that there is some desalinization as part of this plant, which is important, but it's not going to take out the particles that obviously you're experiencing and all our engineers are concerned about. So, Mr. Doyle, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, actually, we have 2 aquifers, by the way, and
Yes.
we always try to correct ourselves when we say the word RO and nano. If you had to think about it, RO is deeper water, okay? And nano is sufficient water. That's where we are now with our wells. So those 2 water sources, by the way, come into the plant, and each one will be directed to the appropriate treatment system. So iron is the best way to explain it because most people could actually physically see it. But the word ferrous and ferric, well, ferrous is iron you can't see. Ferric is the iron that's on the wall after it's got sprayed through irrigation because you know why? It was aerated. So, and I use that because it's too hard to explain the other parameters, but it's not entirely true. Every subtreatment units, by the way, it's a matter of what do you do to keep the membranes from fouling. And what you have to do is just pretty much catch the nano water at the right non-aerated approach. In other words, it's not aerated before it gets there with the least amount of impact right directly from the aquifer. And then you may have to pre-treat it in the form of adding acid. Believe it or not, you could add hydrochloric, muriatic acid, you could add different parameters, but it has to be tailored specifically to that cartridge so that you don't foul it. So, and then those membranes, by the way, comes down to also when it does get fouled, you have to clean them. And that you have a balance between operational needs and mechanical needs. So you want to be backwashing them every other day? No, because it's too expensive. You also lose capacity. And that's the other thing to consider. For every gallon of water we take out, you don't get the full gallon when you're going through a treatment process. So you're losing it to, all those minerals you're going to collect. Well, that's a roughly 15%. So the more and more that you add to treatment, you're only taking away from your end product. So if you do another step, well, then that 1 gallon it's down to 85. Well, then if I have to do another step, well, now it's down to 75. Well, then what did you get out of the 1 gallon? You only got the 75. And what's the needs of the people behind me? Well, they need more than 75. So you have a balance of, it's like you're designing something and reiterating it to figure out how you get the most efficiency both in operation and performance. So, but yes, we are trying different pilot plants. In fact, we have another 2 that CDM's bringing in to actually test the water even further to see if we could add polymer and other products in order to improve the water quality. And this is very typical of other utilities, by the way. They go through this very difficult approach to find out which is the best membrane and what is the best chemical addition that gives us the best performance.
Well, I've been asking that, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Well, I asked that question to our expert consultant, and I said, why are we reinventing the wheel? I imagine other municipalities are drilling into this aquifer and have the same situation. And he said, no, Riviera Beach is different than the other municipalities. That's very concerning when we're getting ready to spend close to $300 million, that we haven't resolved this issue before we got to this point in the design phases. It probably should have been thought about way sooner. The wells should have been tested sooner. We should have thought about this in the very beginning. I'm very concerned about spending this money. I know that I've asked 2 times now, I haven't gotten the answer yet. What would be the increase in fees, in water fees, if we have to bond $300 million? I don't have that answer yet. I know that we raised our fees approximately 30% previously with the expectation that that was going to be used for the new water plant. Now we were told by Mr. Lowe those funds were used to keep the system operating and keep the old plant operating. But we do have to know what this plant is going to cost us and what it's going to cost the people. And I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, but I'm very, very concerned. Is this filtration system going to cause us another year's delay? We're going into 60%. We're 1 year into this design right now. And we're only going into the 60% phase or getting close to it from my understanding. I don't understand why it's taking so long to get this plant designed. I think we have to move faster. We have a very, very serious issue here in the city, as we all know. But we have to come to some resolution on where we're going and how we're going to get there. Because right now, I'm not so sure we're going down the right road.
And we agree on the price, by the way. We've been fighting that issue from day one. So, but in this case, if you probably didn't hear the word pre-treatment, well, that means the main treatment unit is acceptable. And we do compare notes with other utilities. For example, Seacoast Utilities, they're the closest to us.
Right, but we have a limit on how much we're allowed to take out.
Yep.
And if we're getting less because of the filtration, we're not going to meet the needs of the city. We're not going to meet the growth expectations of the city. We're not going to meet the current needs of the city.
Yeah. What we're looking to do is transfer the load from the Floridan superficial aquifer, the upper one where we are now, to the RO type. And it costs more money to treat it, but it's more consistent water. And
Right.
it is a little elevated chlorides, but it's not like salt water. It's not like that at all.
Right, but you'll be going down about 1,200 feet as opposed to the 250, 300 feet.
I put
correct?
in wells anywhere on the East Coast from 750 to 1,500, 2,300. It
Yeah,
just
right.
varies
Long
all
Beach
over.
and the Lloyd Aquifer, we went down 1,500. So
Yeah, you
know
did.
that. You're familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Additional comments from the board? There was a recommendation to reduce the amount for the piggybacking. Is that going to be something that a board member brings to the table? Board Member McCoy, go ahead.
I mean, there was a lot of recommendations. Number one is, let's back up. Did I hear the manager declared an emergency? How's that possible?
Based upon the conversation that we had or listened to you all last week, the impression I got is to bring this forward for this circumstance, we had to bring it in as an emergency. That's why we're here tonight.
Okay, but I thought the board sets forth and does the declaration by way of a vote that this is an emergency. Ms. Nguyen?
Yeah, thank you.
As it relates to the purchase, my understanding was that procurement had someone fill out an emergency justification form for this particular procurement. Now, if you're going to operate under a different unit, you want to have our own contract, as I believe you stated, because it's our emergency, then perhaps the council should make a motion to treat this as an emergency. But I thought, Mr. Doyle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the emergency justification form that procurement has you fill out, I thought you filled that out.
I did.
No. Ms. Nguyen?
So are we talking about two different things?
Well, let me stop you. So there is not going to be a process that the utility district board can have staff to unilaterally go and execute an emergency procurement, because that completely usurps the board's authority. Because if that's the case, staff can be signing off on things that's an emergency and would never ever come to the board. So that is a decision that the board has to make. There's no way under any sort of segregation of duties can the very people who have the responsibility of executing something above the signing authority or above the normal procedure can unilaterally do it without some checks and balances.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
And
Attorney Nguyen, finish.
well, for instance, if this were an emergency at $4 million, even if staff did fill out the emergency procurement justification form, it would still come to you because it's over the amount of $25,000. So it would always come to you. So you're right, there are some checks and balances.
Well, there's none here because apparently someone said that it was authorized yesterday, Mr.
Mr. Chair, if I may
Evans, go
provide
ahead.
some additional clarity,
Thank you.
the justification that was provided that it bypasses the procurement process whereby we ask the board for the authorization to enter into an agreement for the services provided for. And so that's in fact what is before you this evening, is to enter into an agreement with Global Tech for the purposes of addressing some of the concerns with regards to the well. It's not that you're providing the manager, a blank check for $4.8 million to invariably do what he feels appropriate. It's more so that you bypass the procurement process and take it to the board for the purposes of ratifying the actions, and ultimately is the decision of the board. And it is the board that requested for this item to invariably come back at a special or emergency meeting for consideration.
And if I could add to that, the only way this could come back, and I think Dr. Spirit has picked up on it last week, which is why he asked me to look into it, is because it's piggybacking a CCNA contract. And you can't piggyback a CCNA contract unless it is deemed to be an emergency. So in your backup, you'll see the emergency procurement request form. That's there also for your review. So the only way you could piggyback on this contract, because it is CCNA, is if it's an emergency.
Board Member McCoy?
I thank you, Ms. Nguyen, for that clarification. But again, we're seeing this for the first time. But even still, Ms. Nguyen, that's not what the resolution calls out. And I would much rather like it cleaner if the board, similar to what happened in 2015 and 16, does the declaration of an emergency to authorize, these kind of expenditures, as opposed to staff being able to do it. And, this is something that we could potentially, because we got a real solid team here that, if we have someone that is, in a rush, that they may abuse it. So I don't think that this is a process that we need to begin, because this is going to be something else for the IG to ding us on, that emergency procurement authorizations were approved without the board's authority. I can see that already, and emergency is so subjective. So this resolution doesn't even say that. So bid in the backup, I mean, it could be, I just haven't seen it. And very interestingly, Mr. Evans, I apologize, but the utility district agenda has been removed from the website. This last week. I closed my browser now. I can't even find it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Evans, go ahead.
I think when the time for the next meeting is to start, when it automatically bumps out that particular meeting, and that's something through Granicus, but we can.
It's not even in the available archives either.
Mr. Chair.
Board Member McCoy, you
Ms.
finished?
Yeah, I can't look at the backup, so yeah.
Board Member Miller Anderson, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add comments to what Mr. McCoy is stating. I think that's something new because that happened to me last week. I was unable to get back into it. So that must have been some sort of change as of last week, because it's never done that before.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's something actually that if you don't download the PDF and there's a meeting that is scheduled to occur, it automatically bumps that. So it's actually happened to me for a while, and I think that's something that's provided for in Granicus, but we can look to, stagger the times. We'll get with the vendor and get that addressed.
All right, well, that kind of cuts me out of saying anything else, so I think that's a good thing. So, that's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Board Member McCoy.
Mr. Chair,
Board Member Spiritus, go ahead.
I'd like to make, is it appropriate for me to make a motion right now?
I believe there's a motion on the table. Did you want to
Right,
amend it?
Can we ask the person who made the motion, I guess I made the motion, right? I moved the motion.
Sure,
I'd like to amend my motion.
you can.
I'd like to add, as per staff's recommendation, we consider this an emergency action.
Well, if we consider it an emergency action, then we're not doing the piggyback.
We can bring it in-house and do it internally. But to that point, Mr. Evans did state that the timing is of the essence, because if we just make it an emergency and bring it in-house, it's going to take a little bit longer. So his recommendation was to reduce this resolution to a lower amount to address some of the wells that we have outstanding. Do we have an amount? Oh, go ahead, Board Member McCoy.
But if that's the case, then we don't need the emergency then.
Correct.
So
Mr.
the
Chair?
emergency is just for the purposes of us invoking our own agreement.
Mr. Chair?
Dr. Spears, go ahead.
I thought, Counselor, I thought that you said that we could not do a piggyback without it being declared an emergency action.
Under CCNA, that is correct.
Okay.
Therefore, I keep my amendment, as per staff's recommendation, we declare this an emergency action.
Ms. Nguyen? The CCNA is not called out in our code of ordinances.
That's a requirement of Florida statutes, Mr. McCoy.
Okay,
That if you want to piggyback a CCNA contract, it has to be an emergency. Otherwise, you have to do your own CCNA solicitation.
okay, Ms. Nguyen, do you have that authority?
There is an Auditor General opinion. There's nothing else
I
out
got an
there that I've
opinion
been
too,
able to
Ms.
find.
Nguyen.
I'm
Is there
sorry?
something in statute that provides for that though?
Not that talks about piggybacking CCNA, no. The piggybacking isn't mentioned in CCNA, so again, under statutory construction, you can't add something in that's not already there
So piggyback is not mentioned
in the
statute.
CCNA statute, correct?
So
And so you can't
if it's
put it
not
in there to make
mentioned-
it acceptable.
Okay. So what happens to, my concern is the SBE percentage. Because again, I'm sorry that we're repeating this, but we didn't have time for this agenda and we just lost the agenda. So please, I'm in preschool here. Tell me what's going to happen. Because I don't have the agenda and I'm just not sure what we're doing. We're declaring an emergency to use, I guess, the existing
Mr. Chair,
county's agreement, and then we're gonna go with the 25%, 24%?
24% or whatever it's 24, I believe,
Ms. Evans, go
Yeah.
ahead.
which,
And-
which, by the way, we could hold them to our standards for the 24%. So that 15%, the instructions are behind that as far as how it's broken up. It's supplied entirely to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Ms. Evans, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if that is a principal issue that's effectively providing for a reservation in regards to the board, I think it would probably be appropriate to have the representative from Globotech come up and assure the board that they are committed to ensure that there is local participation and cure that particular issue to be able to effectively move forward accordingly. If the board wants to have something on record, that they in fact will make sure that at minimum that they reach what is required pursuant to the code here in the city of Riviera Beach.
Sure.
Board Member Lanier, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if Global Tech comes and says what they say, that the issue sometimes is that people say something, but it doesn't happen. They say that they want the local participation, but a lot of times it doesn't happen. So we need to be assured that there will be local participation and we get that 15% local participation for the city of Riviera Beach and not for Palm Beach County. So I want to make sure that regardless of what is being said, I'm concerned about what is going to happen and what is being done.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Certainly, and I think I have somebody in mind that could assist in making sure that effectively we have that accomplished as it relates to this particular project. So I will certainly task someone to work closely with Global Tech to make sure that at minimum that is accomplished pursuant to the code and if not exceeded and meet what the recommend or what the standard is in the Palm Beach County contract.
Mr. Chair.
Board Member Lanier, are you finished?
Yeah.
Board Member Spears, go ahead.
Chair. So are we going to have an owner's rep on this project, Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, go ahead. It's something in that capacity, but yes, someone that is going to monitor this project to ensure that we meet the definition of local participation here in the city of Riviera Beach.
No, I mean, Mr. Chair, okay?
Go ahead.
No, I mean further than that. I mean, from an engineering standpoint and work product, are we going to have an engineering firm as an owner's rep on this project? Who could be responsible for ensuring that the minority and women requirements are met.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yes, we will have both an owner's rep and then someone to look at the local and minority participation associated with it. So we're going to have it from a technical standpoint, but also from, compliance with the code.
Thank you. Board Member McCoy, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Someone sent me the agenda, so I got a bunch of questions to ask now. No, one question. Has we done all the engineering?
This,
Yes.
no, this is an active, when you work on wells, by the way, we actually have, one of it listed is have JLA, who's a hydrogeologist, one of the best ones I've known so far. They'll be monitoring the activity because you have to determine almost immediately when doing the wells, what action could be taken. In other words, you're really trying to rehab it, and you don't want to just walk away and say, oh, it didn't work. No, you got to go down and see what you really did, video. So that has to be monitored by an outside engineer, in this case, a hydrogeologist. So that's what's in the scope too, by the way, is to have JLA come in there and actually sit there. I hate to say it, be there the whole time, while they're doing this work to make sure they're doing it properly.
Thank you.
Additional comments from the board? So the amendment to the motion was made by Dr. Spiritus. I believe Board Member McCoy seconded. Does your second still stand with the addition of the emergency?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Additional comments from the board? Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
I do not have any public comment cards for this item, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Board Member Spiritus, Board Member McCoy,
Yes.
Board Member Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lanier,
Yes.
Chair Lawson,
Yes.
unanimous vote.
Thank you. Discussion, deliberation, discussion by city manager.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, will
I'm
we
sorry.
be doing public comment, general public
Apologize.
comment?
How many public comment cards do we have, ma'am?
We have 6 public comment cards, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Public comment shall begin at 5:30 unless there's no further business of the board, which in the event it shall begin sooner. In addition, if an item is being considered, comments from the public shall begin immediately after the item has been concluded. Please be reminded that the utility district has adopted rules of decorum governing public comment during official meetings, which is posted at the front desk. In the effort to preserve order, if any of the rules are not adhered to, the board chair may have the disruptive speaker or attendee removed from the podium, from the meeting, or the building. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Madam Clerk?
The first speaker will be Cindy March, followed by Rochelle Hughes, and then Margaret Shepherd.
Thank you. Ms. March? I believe she may have stepped out. Next speaker?
The next speaker is Rochelle Hughes.
Good evening, board,
Good evening, Ms.
staff.
Rochelle.
My name is Rochelle Hughes, live in Riviera Beach. So I just have to tell you, I'm really confused right now. I was here at last week's meeting, and my understanding was there was a motion on the floor made to remove Mr. Lowe as the executive director of the utility district. And at the same time, there was a motion to make Mr. Doyle the acting executive director. Then we had tonight the resolutions of making that happen, and it got denied. But he's listed as interim, but then there's acting. So I think for the public, we may need the definition between what an interim executive director is and an acting executive director. Kind of like Ms. Hall over here, she's, I think, interim city clerk or acting city clerk. So there's kind of like, I think they have the same meaning, but I'm not sure. So, but I was a little confused when it came up tonight that we didn't want to, that the board didn't want to appoint Mr. Doyle as the acting, but when he came up to speak on the sheet, he's listed as interim. So I just need that. Number 2, the water plant. Are we even under construction yet? Because I'm kind of a little bit confused on that. I wasn't sure if the design had been picked yet from one of the other meetings. So are we under construction yet? Or are we still testing the wells? And just kind of like an update on that, because this whole thing has been really confusing to follow. Because also just note, the agenda packet was never on the website before this meeting, because I looked at 3 o'clock today just to see, and there wasn't even an agenda on there. So for those of us coming in, I know you guys got it, but we couldn't look up the backup to anything. Also, in closing, I just want to say this utility district board, and I don't mean to, I'm going to be funny, but I don't mean to sound whatever, but this utility district board should probably talk to the council members. And maybe until we have a new water utility building and system, that we do a moratorium on building. Because right now, we're all lacking good water, we're all lacking water pressure. And it just seems like the more we see more building going on, it's only going to continue to get worse before it gets better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Margaret Shepherd, followed by Lloyd Brown, Dolores Williams, and Mrs. Mary Brown.
Margaret Shepherd, Riviera Beach. Uh, Last week was one of the longest meetings I've ever been in. We started at, I think, 5 and ended up 8:30. It is just kind of sad we're not getting anywhere with this water department. We want to do the 3 fire stations. We want to do the police station. We want to do an aquatic center. And yet, you got the bonds. And yet, the water is one of the most important things I think mankind needs. I'm really kind of upset because my house now looks like a warehouse with water. I heard someone say they drink the water, they like the water. Um, and I give it open arms if that's what you want to do, is drink the water. Once the health department, I think, designate that there's something going on in that water, the fecal water, everything else to me, maybe one of the fire stations should have gone. I just don't understand how we're putting all the money in the fire stations. We're going to spend every penny that we have with the bonds, and yet human life, it just seems like human life just doesn't matter. I've been in the homes of some of the seniors this past week, and my heart went out to them. And I had to go home, put the water in my car, bring some of the water back to these senior citizens. I think our senior citizens deserve a little bit more than what they're getting. You can afford the water, they cannot afford the water. And to put our residents through this, 6 members of the board, you have Mr. Evans. I just don't understand why didn't you go in consultation and just ask Mr. Evans to let Mr. Lowe go. He said he wanted to go. He jumped up. I've been here 50 years. I've never seen nobody get that hysterical and just tear everything off the table. That showed a lack of respect for the city of Riviera Beach. I think we deserved a little bit more than what he done. I understand it was heated debate. He was grilled. I understand that. He probably was up under pressure, like we all are. But it comes a time we need to set some type of standard. We just allow anything to go. Say to us anything you want to say to us. But the most important thing is that we're not down to the business of taking care of the residents that can't take care of themselves. While I'm in the home with these people, I get to hear a lot of tragic stories that we here don't get a chance to hear. Thank you.
Next is Lloyd Brown, followed by Dolores Williams and Mary Brown.
Good evening. You know what? We still got a flat tire and nobody trying to fix it. They go on looking for the nails that were laying in the street. You know, the water's bad. The churches know it because they don't have fountains no more. They give out bottled water. Who paying for that? Are the city giving them some kind of discount for bottled water? You know what I mean? Could you go up to Walgreens and say, hey, you know, I live in Riviera Beach. They told me y'all give me 10% off because I'm buying this bottled water because the water we got, it's got fecal matter. You know, when I was coming up, I saw a lot of science fiction movies where the water was bad. And you know, now if you go through a map of the United States, there's a lot of cities like this where the water's bad. But see, I don't live in those other cities. And you know, we got people in my neighborhood don't speak to you. You got foreigners, they do. You got some that don't. But you know what? I'm talking up for all of them because they drink this water and they taking baths in this water. I haven't seen a damn politician come over here and say anything about we're gonna try to come up here and help y'all with this water. I'm talking about power, none of them. All them signs down there, you never seen none of them come over here and say, Riviera Beach got bad water. We're gonna get in there and try to help y'all out. No, what one of them come in and say, we're gonna get all these homeless people off of this public property. Most of those homeless people are drinking water, you know, too, and they can't afford it. And you know, just because you're homeless don't mean you're bad. But let's get back to this water. You going through all this BS up here. Every time you come in there, I come in a meeting, just a bunch of BS, 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 nothing done. And I mean, you politicians, you black politicians, seem like since you've been in there, everything seemed to be falling apart. City of Riviera Beach is on the low part of the totem pole. And we're not gonna grow with y'all there, because y'all wanna argue and put the blame. Who cares if this man did what he did? I mean, it's like I'm looking for a kidney. Now that's a different situation. I have to have one that's compatible. But a water plant, you can build that and it's compatible to people who drinking the water. We're not looking for a kidney transplant or a heart transplant, and you make it so difficult like it's a big deal. The water's bad, and that's the bottom line. And y'all don't really give a damn. I know you don't, because I see you talking to these politicians that come in here. And you know what this man told me? I'm just quoting these words. He said, if you got a black politician that's got a white friend who's a politician, don't trust him. And I'm just quoting. Now, it's not what I feel. I looked at him like, you know, oh, you crazy. And another man told me, never get on a boat. He said, with a white guy. But that's not the point I'm saying. The water's bad. I just wanted y'all to hear that because you don't like me no way.
Thank you for your comment, sir.
Dolores Williams.
Welcome, Mr. Lawrence.
Good evening, Sir Chairman, Mr. Chargett, and our city manager, and to all the citizens of Riviera Beach. I tell you, I got so many people in it tonight, but I don't have that much to say. But I'm gonna not pick on Miss Margaret, but I think it's the truth. When are they gonna start on the water plant? You could have had this done about 4 years, 5 years ago, but it's not. So, Mr. Evans, you know I tell you like as a friend. When you gonna have some more engineers to help? Wait a minute, he just resigned. You need more engineers there. You should have brought, we won't be fooling with all this right now. You should have brought some more help in for this man. You need more engineers to help to get this water ready. If I could take some of y'all to my house right now, I put just 3 buckets I put out there for the dogs to drink water. Do you know that water's the color of this right here, right now? I should have brought those buckets over, let you see that water. If you want to, you can go to 1219 West 9th Street, go past that white van and look at them 3 buckets of green water. I don't know what happened, but sir, I know they drilled you last week, but you need some more help. They need some more engineers help. And that's another thing I want to say. You was talking about the wells, and I remember y'all talking about $50 million to do something about some wells about 5 or 6 years ago. Are these the same wells y'all trying to work on? Then it was saying it was going to build the water plant back down here where they made that storage thing. It used to be a plant, or some kind of plant there. They said, no, we can do it. That's when Councilor Lanier was saying, I learned so much about, we didn't know about all this water, and they were saying they had to dig so deep to go because the water was so contaminated. Have y'all got all that land straightened where y'all gonna build this plant? Is that what you're talking about, sir? And that's another thing I want to say. When you have the city, home, business, and everywhere, it's cutting your grass, and y'all blow all that stuff out in the street. You could be riding by, they just blow it right on your car. So when all these pipes and all this stuff break, and y'all tell us we got to pay all that money from our house to the street, we're not gonna pay it, because y'all should make sure them people have a catcher that can catch that grass, and they catcher stop blowing in the street. And hire some more ambassadors, hire some more of these young people to help clean up this city. I went to Indianapolis with a church convention. I'm telling they streets were just like brand new streets. They didn't have no trash or nothing in that street. But we can do the same here because we the place to work, live, and what? Have fun. We gonna make that to be the true thing.
Mary Brown.
Do we have any additional cards after that, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Brown is the last speaker, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Chair and board, and to the entire community. Thank you, representatives from Washington, D.C., as well as Tallahassee, that engaged with Ms. Bram on a tour and other places in her city. Thank you all. I'm going to say this. Last week, the community-based heard what exactly some of the things that I was dying for them to hear. Your plant is devastated. Holes are in your wells. You cannot expect any betterment at this particular time in your water. Until we do the necessary things that we must do. I'm for going out, back out. This is a necessity. So, okay, so maybe some things that we did not get right. But Ms. Bram is going to pass on over here. And every business and every home development that is built here, the other generations are going to come in and they're going to live in it because they are going to be educated to get those jobs. And they are going to afford, there will be affordability so that they can survive the eternity of this city here. So if we need to go out for another bond for our water utility district here, this is priority because residents, you're not going to get any better. Washington, D.C. done already told me that. You're not going to get any better. So we need to come to this conclusion here. Yes, the whole entity of our city needs to be built up. That is a known fact. And when you always say that Mr. Evans, tell this board here, these 5 peoples up here is Mr. Evans authority. They are in charge of him. Palm Beach Post, Ruth Christie, Tony Doris, you will not endorse any of these candidates here because this water been going on ever since they took that seat there. This is nothing new here. Every previous council, they must be judged on the markers and the groundbreakers of that they have achieved and accomplished in their particular tenure. Yes, it has been good ones up there on that board there that have tried to move in that direction. So if you do this disservice here, we're going to do some backlashes here with the Palm Beach Post. Mr. Evans is under the auspice of that board there.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Bram.
He can't move anything.
Thank you for your
without
comments.
that board.
Madam Clerk?
That's the end of public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, did you want to respond to any of the comments?
Mr. Chair, I'll communicate some of my, as part of the executive director or discussions by city manager, I can answer some of those. A couple of things just for the board's edification. We've had some conversations internally at the utility district about some staff augmentation. We have had some preliminary discussions with U.S. Water to assist in coming in to provide some additional support to staff and help with some of the operational challenges that are present at the water plant as well as in our well fields. So be anticipating something that will come before you for consideration. Also, we are looking at some additional personnel to come in on a contractual basis under the manager's authority to assist at the water treatment plant as well. A couple of things in our preliminary review. There are two agreements that are expired that we need to bring forward for the board's reconsideration or re-engagement, and those are non-monetary agreements between the JV team, which is CDM Smith Haskell, as well as Brown and Caldwell. We found out that those agreements have since just expired, and so we need to bring that item before this board for consideration. Also, one of the things that has been brought up is the cost for the water treatment plant. We are setting up an opportunity for you all to be briefed from our rate consultant concerning what the costs are for the water treatment plant is going to anticipate to be. I had a very productive conversation with Mr. Doyle, and him and I shared the same perspective that we think that the number that is on the table is entirely too high, and we're working to try to bring that number down as it relates to what the cost for the treatment plant is. And Mr. Grace is also working with his team. Also, the board knows that we have brought on Dr. Philip Harris to assist in looking at and exploring other opportunities whereby we're looking for grants to help augment or buy down the cost for whether it's the wells or the water treatment plant. So a lot of things that we're looking to bring before you. There is actual construction-related activities that are happening on the water treatment plant site. There is some site work that's being done. There's been the demolition of the fuel islands that are there, and then there's some exploratory boring that's occurring there, but there's some site activity. We did have a productive and have had productive conversations with the JV team from CDM Smith and Haskell, and we communicated to them the desires to effectively accelerate the water treatment plant so the board can see some progress on that particular site. So they're acutely aware of that and want to facilitate a workshop discussion with the board where they share with you where they are in the design process, some of the challenges they're experiencing, and then some of the things that they are in fact doing to be able to move your water treatment plant. One of the things that was mentioned as part of the plan is the overall cost. Please realize that when they are citing costs, they are actually going to the market and getting actual hard costs for those numbers. And so it's not a situation whereby if we looked at other alternatives that you will find substantial savings, but we are looking at overall plant design. We're looking at focusing principally on the production of the water and a high water quality, and then any other accoutrements associated with office space. That's the secondary element of that. And so when you do see designs that come before you for consideration, the primary and principal focus is going to be on the water side. And the building will be a nice building, but it will function in a utilitarian perspective versus something that is a little bit more grander because the focus is in fact the water. So again, we wanted to try to move forward with some of these agreements to place it on the agenda, and we certainly will make sure that subsequent agendas are posted in a more timely fashion. But I can tell you that Mr. Doyle and the team have jumped in to peel back different layers of what's occurring over at the utility district to address some of the challenges. So I believe that we're going to move a lot of things forward, and I'll be working closely with Mr. Doyle and the team to effectively bring some items that the board can see some action on the water treatment plant. And we did deliver the $80,000 I personally delivered it to the health department last week after the authorization was provided by the board. And so that concludes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. District Attorney?
No comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Statement from the board, starting with Council Board Member Lanier.
I just wanted to have for my review, and of course for the public's review, is that all of this talk about water plant and about maintenance and upgrades, we need to have a timeline.
We need to know what is happening, when it's going to start, when it's going to end, how much it's going to cost. Because at this point, in terms of the water plant, we just hear that we are working on it, but no timeline, nothing tells us this is where we are, this is how much it's cost us so far. And the same thing with the upgrades. You have to do things simultaneously, and you can do it simultaneously. You have to fix what we have and then still work on the water plan. It seems like we're getting mixed up in terms of which is important. They're both important. We have to keep what we have going, and we also have to have a new water plant. But there is nothing that's laid before us to give us some type of timeline because it hasn't happened. And that's what we need as a board, and the public needs to know what a timeline looks like for these repairs and for the new plan.
Thank you for your comments, board member. Board member Spiritus?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I agree with my colleague, uh, board member, or you're the deputy, I guess, of the agency, of the district. My concern is that they give us deadlines and they don't meet the deadlines. So that's pointless. I think we have to have a serious conversation with our engineers and with Haskell. I'm very concerned with the whole design build concept. I'm against design build. We should have just done design and then put it out to bid. But regardless, 1 year is way too long to be at 50% design. We're not reinventing the wheel. There are many, many plants similar to the one that we're building all across this country that are built, and we don't have to reinvent this. I don't understand why it's taking so long. I have major concerns with that, and I'm looking forward to the workshop, Mr. Evans, because I have some major questions for our engineers and Haskell with respect to their deadlines and their timelines and what's going to happen here. I would recommend, I read the report from the mayor and I read Mr. Lowe's comments. Very disturbing, by the way. Similar to what he said at the meeting, that the entire water district is in a mess, and it's a horrible, horrible situation, obviously, and we have to take the bull by the horns here. Uh, we have to make this move faster. I would suggest, Mr. Evans, that you contact our state representatives and see if you can meet with the governor's office and see if the state has some people that can assist us. I think you ought to do the same with our federal representatives and see if EPA can come down here and assist us, because this is not the first time they've seen situations like this. They have engineers that are used to dealing with situations like this, and we have to get them in here because we're in a very, very serious emergency situation concerning our water. Uh, Otherwise, I'm glad we're first starting on the wells. At least we're doing something. We know that we're going to have to do close to 27 of those wells. So we might want to add that into our budget when we talk about value engineering. I'm glad we're doing value engineering. I think you ought to take a look, Mr. Doyle, at Stewart, because I believe that Stewart just put in some wells with a similar company for 650,000, and they were even deeper than the ones that we're planning. So I think we should just not look at one city or community. I think we have to start looking broadly because we're not the only one in this situation. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Board member McCoy.
Thank you. A few questions. Will the board ever be provided with an explanation as to this in June? I think I have to agree with board member Spiritus. I mean, I read what Mr. Lowe stated in his response, but there seems to be a disconnect. And Ms. Nguyen, Mr. Evans, I'm not sure what is occurring here, but there is a lot of information that is not being provided to the board. And I can tell you, I'm not even speculating. I'm telling you the absolute truth, and I can very much prove it. It's been established in that settlement agreement, Ms. Nguyen, that I certainly want your attention on this because I am going to offer a motion here in a moment. Seemingly, the settlement agreement says that the utility district director reports directly to the board. Very interesting. Even though we don't have the authority to terminate him or her, we have the authority to remove them. But I don't understand, and I think a lot of my motivation to offer up a motion to relieve Mr. Lowe of his duties was because he can't even give me an answer. At what point does somebody who's in charge of our district, which is now, the closest to it is the assistant director, explain to the board where this process failed at? And it's been 13 months and we've still not gotten anything. So I don't think that anybody who's saying that we're getting rid of somebody without a plan, we have some dissidents that are defiant and they choose to protect and hide. This is open government. I don't understand how I'm accountable to the voters and the people who don't vote in this city to provide an explanation when I can't even do that. Because I got somebody that's running the district that's making six figures that won't even give the board, the very board that employs them in an operational standpoint, an answer. We haven't gotten anything. And I'm not sure what we're waiting on at this point. And that for me, Mr. Doyle, assistant director or not, if you look at the property appraisers map, you look at City Hall and you look at the utility district, they're on two different plats. They're two different properties. So if you're not doing the business of the district, you can get off of the district property. And that goes for anybody in any position because we have the ultimate responsibility. When you look up special districts on the Department of Economic Opportunity website, it lists the board as being those that's governed in charge, not the manager, not the attorney, not the finance director. The executive director does serve in the role of registered agent, but ultimately responsibility is ours. And I don't know where there's a situation why we can sit here and allow someone to go 13 months without giving us an explanation. So that was my motivation for it. And if he feels so compelled to protect whoever it is or whatever he's trying to do, be it a friend or ally or something he's trying not to do, there's not any place for you in Riviera Beach, especially when we got this crisis. And for those that have been around, this seems like deja vu. Just, I can tell you 7, 8 years ago, I was just on the other side of that line. So I was seeing it from this perspective, but I just don't understand how we can continue to let this go. But I can tell you, without, but one person doesn't stop the show. And it will go on, whether Mr. Lowe's in that position, whoever's in that position. But I just don't think we need to get caught up in that. So I need to know, when will we be provided with the narrative of what exactly is the breakdown and who's responsible? That's my first question.
Mr. Evans, do you want to address that?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
With respect to the narrative, that's part of the information that's all been provided to the Office of the Inspector General. So there's copious records, documents, bits and pieces of information that they are in interrogatories that they're effectively going through to find that information out. And as soon as we find that information out, we certainly will make sure that that is provided to the board in a comprehensive fashion.
Oh,
go ahead.
So I had an opportunity last week to call Inspector General's Carey's myself. And the very first thing, Ms. Wynn, if I can have your attention on this, is I questioned him as of his authority. I went back to Palm Beach County's ordinance on the Office of Inspector General. It lists 39 municipalities and I believe Children's Services Council and perhaps one other agency, but the utility special district is not specifically called out in their authority. So that's number one. So until the board actually acquiesces his authority, I mean, what he's doing is more or less gratis. And even if he comes up with some sort of findings, it's just findings about what the breakdown was. But that doesn't preclude the board members from being provided with whatever information, no different than we've been provided with other investigatory issues. So I am going to ask that I be provided with a copy of what exactly happened. Somebody needs to get to writing because the OIG has no authority over this board. If this board was outsourced to U.S. Water or whoever else, they wouldn't have any ability to be able to say that they're conducting an investigation. So that's, in my opinion, that's not even sufficient to even keep us from having the information. Ms. Wynn, can you please look into determining if we can be provided that? Because I don't accept what the manager's saying, because that's neither here nor there. One investigation doesn't
There's
stop.
nothing to stop you from being provided any information. It's I would assume it's all public record. If something needs to be redacted, it can be, but there's nothing to prevent that.
Well, good. Now you just made me, now I really feel vindicated about the decision that we made on the 17th. Because Mr. Lowe seems to have had the information and wants to protect it. Now, the other interesting thing that I've seen in Mr. Lowe's response to the mayor's report, or whoever that person that was doing the investigation, was that he is limited on his ability to do what it is that he needs to do. And that was very clear. Not to mention, when he sat in front of us, he said that he's brought items to this board and he has not been able to get it through. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, I don't ever recall anytime in the last 5 years that I've been here that something has been brought to the board that we haven't supported. And I think I said this very clearly in 19 that I'm going to disagree, but I can tell you I'm not going to compromise water quality or anything related to the water utility district, because that's the very service that we have to provide, and that's essential. So I don't buy that. And apparently, some information from the utility executive director filtered through administration is not getting to us. And let me tell you how I know. I find it very interesting. If we go back to 2019, there was a gentleman that was here in the utility district director's position called Mr. Willie Horton. Ironically, brought a resolution before us, seemingly asking for the control to be restored back to the utility director so he doesn't have to go through the city administration. And if we go back 2 years prior to that, the previous executive director has said the same exact thing. So, Mr. Evans, I'm not sure where the bureaucracy is, but it falls on you. Here's why. Resolution 3219 that we alluded to earlier provided that you had the supervision of the office of the utility director. Mr. Evans, when did you find out about this June 2023 report, or I guess the samples that were taken?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
a couple of things that were asserted. I never worked with Mr. Horton, never had the opportunity to work with him, so that was prior to my tenure. Additionally, I don't know of a circumstance or situation whereby administration has been invariably a gatekeeper from anything that goes before the board, because the agenda management for the utility district resides specifically in the district with the district secretary. So there's not a situation whereby information is ever provided. One of the things that I will make the board acutely aware of, that you get more correspondence from me on a variety of different issues, whether it's a street light being out. And so to assert that I would not provide you the information as soon as it was provided to me, when you all received the briefing from me, that is when I found out about what the issues were. And so that was sometime, I believe, in December or January. I don't recall the specific date. And that's when that information, when I told the staff to brief all the board members concerning what has been discovered before you end up reading it in a public communications. And I think Councilperson McCoy, you and I had a pretty lengthy email correspondence back and forth with respect to that. So to assert that there is situation where there's information being concealed, that's not even how I operate, and that's not how our team operates. There is obviously some flaws in the system, and I think that we are trying to work towards resolving those issues, because at the end of the day, we understand that the public trust, especially concerning water and water quality, is paramount. I do want to venture a little bit further back in history, when it was this administration that went to numerous community meetings with Mr. Grace to show the community different types of water, the water quality, had workshops, had multiple meetings. So there is no plot or nefarious plan to compromise the integrity of the water and not communicate that as soon as it was provided to administration.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans, what exactly is your supervisory authority? And if you have an employee that has something that is not just important, it is a matter of public health, do you not have oversight over this utility director that you would know about that?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
If that information is communicated to me, you all know well enough that when there's information shared with me, I will, whatever time of evening it is, I will make sure that there's correspondence provided to you all. And so if there is a situation whereby there is concerns that are elevated to administration from a department director, that and the information is provided in totality, absolutely we would share it with the board.
Thank you. Follow up.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans, I just find that very peculiar that you would ask us to ratify your termination if you see you have an employee that's being defiant and going against best practices and actually violating the law in terms of not notifying the public. I don't understand that. So why would you look for us to ratify that? He's done it to himself, if you would ask me.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
With respect to, anyone's employment and employment matters, I don't discuss those matters in public.
But you got it on the
And-
agenda,
and-
Mr. Evans.
And the reason that I have effectively that matter on the agenda is because if I would have unilaterally made the decision to relieve Mr. Lowe of his duties, I didn't want a situation where it would come back from this board as to who gave you the authorization to effectively do that. And so that was as a step to make sure that I am in compliant with what the desires of the board are. So I'm trying to read the board as to what you would like for us to do and make sure that we do it properly. So if I move forward with hiring somebody, do I need to bring it back for you, or can I make that decision? The clarity of direction is critically important for us to be successful and move forward. So this was to memorialize the action by the board. That's why this item came before you in the form of that particular resolution, because there's no other position that is suitable to move Mr. Lowe in the agency. And effectively, then we're recommending a situation where there's a separation that the board ratifies, because I'm assuming that if the board relieved him from his duties, you do have the authority to make a determination as to who can serve in those duties and responsibilities. If I unilaterally made Mr. Doyle the acting director for the utility district, the board would then question, Mr. Manager, why did you make that decision? So I need to know which direction the board would like for me to go so I can lean in and be able to help as much as I possibly can. But I can't if I don't know where the board desires to go.
Mr. Chair.
Board Member McCoy, go ahead.
Last segment of questions that I'm gonna ask. Well, Mr. Evans, if it's true that you provide us with the information as you do, and I can tell you, I can concur that you're sending emails at 2 o'clock in the morning or whenever they come to your attention. Can you explain about the most recent violations that we got from the health department as recent as this week
Mr. Chair, if I
that
may.
has not been provided to the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may. The correspondence that we received from the health department was some warnings of some items that we need to make sure that they have all the information. So that information was not available for public consumption because there's still some additional facts and information, and we have to meet with the health department within a 15-day window to validate or invalidate those. And so what we want to do, and unfortunately our compliance manager is out of town, is to sit down and see, do we have that documentation and upload it? Because if we can effectively provide that information, those all would be a moot issue. But I haven't had the opportunity to talk to her. And as soon as we have the information, then we will provide that to you all. The same, no different than we did with the previous situation, is that when the first warning letters and when they have happened, staff has gone to meet with the health department to effectively try to cure those issues. And then the health department comes in with a more specific letter. So some of those things, I've already had the internal conversations with staff that we're going to try to comply with providing all the information in that timely fashion. So then I can tell the board what is a bona fide concern from the health department, what is a penalty, and what is a fine if that. And so I didn't want to put out information that was not entirely accurate and not complete in nature.
Right. Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
But if an agency issues a violation against the utility special district, the utility special district consists of 5 members. We haven't even been notified. I mean, I literally got to go to the health department myself to find out that they have active violations that they're pursuing. And this is deja vu. And I don't understand. You're saying that you're sorting this out, Mr. Evans. I don't care that this person's out of town, but the statute that we went through last year, the environmental statute, requires there's certain time frame, there's a certain number of days that if the agency chooses to opt to counter that or to ask for an abatement or reduction, you're gonna run the toll on those, and that's not even been brought to the board's attention.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Stebbins, go ahead.
We did that same day, staff did reach out with the health department to schedule a meeting to go sit and have the conversation with them to find out, in fact, what is the nature of what those complaints are to be able to address that. And so, the principal person that has the data and records, we cannot communicate with them at this particular moment, but they'll be back in the office on Monday. And so we are going to attempt to clear up and provide the information to the health department so they in fact have it, and then provide that information to the board as soon as we get clarity from them that says, okay, the information just wasn't uploaded, or there was an error, or there was a concern.
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Chair if I can.
Please.
I would like to make a motion that, number one, all violations be immediately reported to the board by way of phone call, even if this is an issue that we have not exactly gotten to, but I don't want to find out about it 7 or 8 months later. That's the first part. Secondly, I would like that the utility district director, going forward, or whoever this consultant is, report directly to the board without this whole intermediary of going through administration, because this is where it always gets hung up, that for whatever reason, I don't know why Mr. Lowe held that information, but clearly we have, and I mentioned this last week, and I may have made the mistake in not being clear when I said we've already had one lawsuit filed against us. We've had 768 notices, which means before you can sue a government agency, you have to first put them on notice. So we got one lawsuit filed and another 40 plus that have already been indicating that they're going to file and take legal action against the city utility district. So at some point, we need to be a part of these conversations on the front end, so that way we can know what's going on and we can be able to get into a meeting and offer the supports that Mr. Lowe said he has not been able to get, which I don't know where and how, but either way, it just seems like to me, we know when everybody else knows, but yet we're the first ones that's being questioned by media, being questioned by our residents. And we live here too. So it's just as important, especially, and no point intended, but we live in the city. And I find it very difficult when we got the very people who are in charge of our water that literally driving in and out of here every day, who seem not to have the same passion or concern, or even family members that consume and use these waters as we do. So that's very important. So that's what I would like for, number one, going forward, that whoever acts in this role, be it the director or assistant or interim, reports directly to the board, as opposed to through the manager. And also that all notices be provided to the board either by, some sort of phone or meeting immediately upon receipt.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
That's a motion, Mr. Chair.
Motion is on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Ms.
Chair.
Evans?
With respect to the notification, if the board wants to receive all that information, you don't have to codify it in the form of a motion. We can just provide you that information. That's something that
Mr. Chair, it has to be. There's no way that Mr. Evans can say that when we just experienced 7 months of somebody not doing it. So I don't want this to happen again. So I don't understand why that's even being challenged as if this is unreasonable. I mean, that was the opportunity that staff had to do it the first time. So let's make it abundantly clear, members.
Agreed, Board Member McCoy. Board Member Miller Anderson.
Mr.
The motion that he made is for them to report to the board. When you say report to the board, are you talking about notices, or you're saying on everything, day-to-day operations, every single thing? Because I think you were pretty general in your report to the board. So I
That's
just need to
exactly what I
clarify.
mean, Ms. Board Member Miller Anderson. And I was actually referring back to the specific settlement agreement that was reached in 2022, which calls out the very thing, but for whatever reason, that has not happened. And, that's why I asked Ms. Nguyen to look into it, because she authorized outside counsel and Mr. Lowe actually agreed to doing it. So I don't feel bad that Mr. Lowe has to move on to greener pastures, because he knew he had a duty to report directly to the board, and he did not do that. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, that's exactly what I would want, because I don't want the delay in time. And, I can tell you, since January, you know what happened? Since we first found out about it in January, Mr. Lowe started picking up the phone and calling us until he got us on the phone to tell us of any concern. And that's the way it should have been prior to us finding out 7 months later. You know, somebody needs to be making sure that the very board that oversees the entire utility district is made aware that we have another government agency that has put us potentially under a consent order that has over 900,000, close to $1 million of fines, you know, as a cloud over our head. I mean,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
A couple of things, and the board can certainly codify it in the form of a motion, but I think also you need to make sure that it's incorporated in the job description. You're assuming that there's a situation whereby the new director is going to review this particular information, or that information is going to be shared with them. I think it is critical that it is placed in the job description, that the employee signs off, and it puts language in there that says you shall report X, Y, and Z. And so that's one thing I definitely think the board should incorporate that. Also, if there is as it relates to the motion being a situation where the board reports directly to the utility district, realize that, you know, that's fine. I need direction on how you would like for me to proceed, because right now you don't have an executive director to the utility district. And if in fact that's the case, then it puts us in a bit of a quagmire. So any clarity as it relates to, is it when a successor is named, when a person is placed, that's fine and dandy, and we're willing to help out as much as we possibly can. The other side of it is that the utility district director themselves can report to you, but then the other balance of the employees are bona fide city employees that are protected by collective bargaining agreements. And so as long as we make sure that that's abundantly clear, I just want the board to consider those things as you get ready to make a decision.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Miller Anderson?
Okay, for some reason, I'm just kind of trying to understand this part here. Mr. McCoy, you're saying every single thing, so they're going to come to us on a regular basis for direction on how to move within their department, or is the utility district director, you're saying, is just going to provide us with updates? Or we're talking about day-to-day operations type stuff is what he needs to report to us?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So my recommendation is as provided for in the settlement agreement. And, you know, truthfully, I would argue, Ms. Wynn, that really the board doesn't even need to do this. Because if it's already authorized in the settlement agreement, I believe that's enforceable on its own. But I wanted to codify this so the board can know that the city utility district already has this expectation that the utility district director is supposed to report directly to the board. And understand that our role is in oversight. You know, I don't expect him to call us every day, but we are the governing body. If there are matters concerning public health, then we are to be notified. You know, he is a direct report, or she is a direct report of the utility district board. So, you know, of course, we're going to be giving them direction. And that would be the caveat to the charter provisions, because technically, you know, he's performing a function for us. So he's more or less, you know, he's operating in the authority of the utility district.
Question for that board member or Madam Attorney. The employees of the department, then, if the executive director reports directly to the board, the employees report to the executive director, but they're employees of the city still?
That's correct.
Okay, so they would report to the executive director.
They currently do. They answer to and take direction from the executive director.
And the settlement agreement states that the executive director would now report to the board as opposed to the city manager.
I don't have it in front of me. That's my recollection. I think the settlement agreement also called for us to amend the service agreement between the city and the USD, and we need to bring that to you as well to codify basically everything that's in the settlement agreement into the service agreement.
When will that be brought to us?
I'll have to bring that to you. I'll make it a goal to bring it to you at your August meeting.
Okay, board member
I'll get it to you in advance for review. so that you do have time to review what the changes are in probably a strike-through underline format to make it easier for you. And
Understood.
before you move on, I do want to clarify one thing, since Mr. McCoy said that we have 44 claims, we have 122 claims currently.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
122, you said, Ms.
One,
Attorney Nguyen?
122.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Okay, I guess I must have missed it, but I know that when I last recall hearing, that's where we were.
I
But
think
Ms.
we
Nguyen,
went from 44 to 88 to 122. It's my
one more time?
recollection.
Go ahead,
I'm
Attorney
sorry?
Nguyen. Could you repeat the numbers one more time?
I think we went from 44 to 88 to 122. We got a huge batch in about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago now.
122?
Claims,
122 lawsuits.
claims, yes, sir.
No, these are
Oh, no,
these
no.
are just claims or lawsuits.
Okay, so you know what a claim means, right?
Absolutely.
This
They're
is our
intent.
opportunity to settle this, or
Mhm.
they will be bringing and filing a
Suits.
lawsuit. So you can, I mean, however semantics and call it whatever. So, Ms. Nguyen, last thing I'm gonna say. So, I can understand Board Member Miller Anderson's concern and clarification, but the agreement does provide that the utility director reports both to the manager, the city manager, and also to the utility district board. And I want to just make sure that we codify that in motion, because that has never occurred. In fact,
That's
the only
okay.
time we
You
heard
can
from
do that.
Mrs. Lowe is starting in January when we had this huge issue.
You can do that. If you get a second and it passes, then you will have done that.
Well, if it don't pass, there's always remedies at law, Ms. Nguyen.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, one of the things you could also consider is enter into an employment contract with the executive director. So it would be similar to the situation that I'm currently in and that others are in. And so in that employment agreement, that's when the board can really effectuate what the desires are as it relates to the relationship. So something else for you to consider as you deliberate on, how you want the structure to consider, but certainly that's another mechanism that you can put the shalls and some more of the responsibilities that the board may have specific to this position.
Dr. Spiritus?
So a question to my colleague, Board Member McCoy. So if we're going to have a settlement session, I guess executive session concerning the settlement agreement, and Ms. Nguyen, there is a second settlement agreement I believe they were waiting to have an executive session on. Could we have an executive session on both these settlement agreements very soon when you're feeling better? And will Mr. McCoy, Commissioner McCoy, withdraw his motion, or does he want the motion to still stand?
I'm not sure what you're referring to about a session.
Going to executive session to discuss and decide how we're going to move forward with the settlement agreement at the next meeting. I believe we go into executive session with council to discuss that. I know we have the same thing with a second settlement agreement concerning two of the offices of the city. So I'm thinking that we should do all three very soon and settle those cases and move forward.
Board Member McCoy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board Member Spiritus, there's nothing to settle. This agreement was already reached in 22, I believe it was. So there's nothing for us to settle, sir. This has already been done.
As far as the utility district goes?
Correct. And I just
Okay.
emailed it back to Ms. Nguyen so she can have it and she can disseminate it to the board. But it's already contemplated. There's nothing else that needs to be settled. I think this is binding at this point.
So then all we have to do is enforce it.
Well, in fact, I don't like to use or utilize the word enforcement. I wanted to bring it to the board's attention that this is the way it should have been operating. And I would hope that we can actually move towards that. So that way we're not the last to know. And then the first one being grilled, being held responsible, because clearly there's been no accountability with the previous executive director. None. And it comes to us, and I mean, I can't even go to the grocery store and I don't have an answer. How do I explain that?
No,
And at 144, 122, over 100, I don't know what the number is, just over 100 potential claims. It seems.
Board Member Spiritus, go ahead.
So you really don't have to convince me, obviously. I've been standing up and speaking out against this same situation for years now. So we don't really need a motion. We just need to operate according to the settlement agreement that's already been accepted by
Well,
the.
I'd rather clarify the
here's,
motion.
here's why you have to do it, because that actually was signed by Mr. Lowe. So the next executive director would have no knowledge of that. I mean, going forward, we need to reduce that into this is the policy of the board, not just a settlement agreement. That way, for anyone else going forward, in terms of how we, need to have that line of communication and direct report with the executive director.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So shouldn't staff just amend the rules and regulations that they operate by and include
They
that?
should, but this has been over 2 years, Mr. Board Member Spiritus, that, this has been outstanding, that, and we don't want to micromanage. I would like not to, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm, included in the conversations like today. Nobody up here knew anything about the most recent violations from the health department. And had I not brought it up, did you think someone was going to volunteer it tonight? That's the kind of stuff that I'm referring to.
Right, but I'm trying to get to the point where shouldn't legal staff already incorporate this into the operating procedures of the department and all the rules and regulations?
Seemingly, yes.
So should we direct legal counsel to do so within the next 2 weeks?
But I think once you do this motion, I think that would definitely give them that direction.
So why don't we just ask for legal counsel in the motion to incorporate this within the next 2 weeks?
That's fine.
Mr.
Attorney
Chair,
Wynn, go ahead.
you don't have a meeting within the next 2 weeks. I can get you the draft within the next 2 weeks, but my plan was to put it on your utility district agenda at your third Wednesday meeting in August.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's a motion on the table. And did we have a second, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, there was an amendment to the motion.
If we could restate the motion with the amendment.
The motion is that all violations will be immediately reported to the board. The executive director or interim or consultant is to report directly to the board. All notices to be provided to the board immediately upon receipt, and to incorporate the settlement, I guess, by the third Wednesday in August, which would be the next utility special district meeting.
Mr. Chair.
That's the, one moment, Mr. Evans. So that is the motions on the table and do we have a second? Second still stands? Board member?
I don't think I heard the portion of reporting to the board.
Reporting to the board.
No, I meant not reporting violations. I meant the utility executive director reports to this body as a matter of.
Just for the record, she
the
did,
role.
but
Okay.
it was on there. And does your second still stand, board member?
Yes.
All right, so discussion. In the current position, without this motion and without the settlement, Mr. Evans, what is Mr. Evans' role within the USD prior to this motion?
Very interesting. And the actual settlement agreement points that out, that the city manager was not called out and was not contemplated in the utility special district charter nor inside of the service agreement.
And in 2019, Attorney Wynn, we assigned oversight of the executive director to Mr. Evans?
Supervision, yes.
Supervision. And is that part of the settlement that actually calls for the utility district to not be able to assign that authority?
No, that was not part of the settlement. That was just separate, something that Mr. Evans requested back in 2019.
So
And
are
the
we
the board agreed to it. I'm sorry.
So that resolution, is that something that we are overturning with this motion?
I don't believe that you're overturning that. You have not revoked that resolution or his authority to supervise. My understanding of the motion is that you have just requested that whoever the director is report to you any issues that affect public health, safety, and welfare, and report to you on a regular basis.
So will our city manager still continue to supervise while the executive director reports to us?
Yes, those are two separate matters.
Board, we all are understanding of that. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair,
Dr. Spears.
so I'm going to hate to drag this out, but shouldn't the city manager answer directly to the board and take directives from the board as well?
Board Member McCoy.
Mr. Chair, thank you. You know, very interesting. And I don't think that's contemplated in the charter. So I don't know how you can actually incorporate, having him as an officer right now. The utility district the utility district charter did contemplate that we had the ability to hire consultants, had the ability to employ persons, but it didn't call out the position of a city manager. The user services agreement does set for, the utility services agreement sets for that the city of Riviera Beach shall provide these services. The person that, as we know, is the manager that actually oversees the city of Riviera Beach's operation. So inherently, no, but indirectly, I would say he does by way of his role as the city manager in executing those services that's provided under the services agreement. So this is the most complex thing ever. I'm telling you, this is.
And to that point, I wanted to make sure that we were clear as a board with the direction we're going, what's the expectations and responsibilities when we bring in an executive director. Because essentially in 2019, Mr. Evans is still going to be operating as our city manager who will supervise our executive director, but will also be reporting to the board. Okay. Additional questions before these motions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Evans.
Just for clarity's sake, you communicated that you'd like for any violations. The document that we received is a warning letter with alleged violations. The health department has not codified it. So I would say probably any correspondence that the department receives from a regulatory agency be provided. So it eliminates ambiguity, warning letter, violation, those types of things. So,
Mr. Evans, are those documents public record when we receive them?
They're provided to, everything is in fact a public
So
record.
to that point, I don't think it's a concern. Just send us everything. And it's looking like, as of right now, the concerns and the consideration with the board and where we are with the state of water, the board wants to know everything that's going on. And if that changes moving forward, I'm sure the board will determine how do we want to play and what role we're going to do in that. But as of right now, everything needs to be provided to this board so we can be kept abreast, so we can keep our public abreast on what's going on. Additional comments before we dispose of this item? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Board,
Yes.
Board Member Miller Anderson,
No.
Board Member McCoy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lanier,
Yes.
Chair Lawson.
Yes.
That motion passes with Board Member Miller Anderson dissenting.
Board Member McCoy, did you have any additional comments before we go to Board Member Miller Anderson?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Board Member Miller Anderson?
I have no comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Board Member Spiritus.
can I make just one comment?
Of
I have a
course.
question for the city manager. We've been talking about filing an application with the state under the revolving loan program with DEP. I'm just wondering, I know I received a communication from PSA Engineering stating that they had the ability to put this application together. I don't know if the city manager has discussed this with them or whether he's discussed it with any other engineering company. But can you tell me, are we going to meet the next deadline for submitting an application?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please, Mr. Evans.
PSA is our owner's rep for our fire stations. We do have owner's reps for our utility district that are providing that particular service, as well as the JV team. And so I don't want to commit, because there's contracts in place, and I don't want to have a situation where our owners reps are competing against our owners reps. But nonetheless, I will get some correspondence from them as to what they are in fact going after. But I know they are putting together an application, whether it's for wells or for the water treatment plant. But we did discuss it in our last briefing meeting. So I'll provide some correspondence to the board in writing associated with that.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
That's not satisfactory, Mr. Evans. We've discussed the revolving loan program. I've been told over and over again, we were putting together an application and submitting it. I was told that we missed one deadline and we're going to make the next deadline. We have to know specifically, what are we doing right now? Where are we right now? Are we going to meet the next deadline to submit an application with the state? This is a lot of money at a very low interest rate. They only spend a certain amount of the money on certain projects, so the first ones in are going to get the bulk of the money. So the longer we wait, the less chance we have of getting money, or amount of money that we need.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans.
The team is going after the monies. I need to make sure that it is this funding cycle. That's what I need to effectively confirm. But we have been, working towards that, as well as there's significant operational things that we're doing on a regular basis as well. And so I apologize if there's situations whereby, the board's not getting some of the information it is requesting, but staff is working hard to get you that information, and you'll have something from us probably in the next 24 hours. We have our folks here today that I'll talk to after this meeting.
And Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
At our workshop, you mentioned that you're going to bring some financial information. We're going to be talking about the cost of the plant. Can we please make sure that our financial director gives us what the cost will be, the increases based upon 100 million, 150, 200, 250, so we know what the increases to the public would be in the fees, so we know what we're really getting ourselves into and whether the people are going to be able to afford the water. Thank you.
Thank you. And my only comments, while I understand that the media will chop and cut comments up if in public, I saw probably the most frustrating, ignorant comments last week that said, we do not have this conversation with our staff in public. Yet, as a board, we sit in the sunshine, and this is the only time that we can talk to our staff, have the discussions, and drill in to figure out what's going on. When we have people walking up to us in Publix and asking us questions and we don't know, we have to ask these questions in public because of the sunshine, because of some of the charter requirements, and because of what our role is as a board. So when residents don't understand the role that we're taking by making these decisions in the public setting, that's where we have to be very clear with this. This is where the only time that we can speak as a board. That's one. Two, the next concern is going to be the focus on how we actually move this city forward. I'm concerned with where are we going with the executive director position, because we've made a motion to deny tonight. And board, we haven't discussed what's going to be our next step is putting an executive director in place. So being that we have to have that clear direction, I want us to get somebody moving with this. We've had talks about consulting firms coming in. We've had talks about looking for a new executive director. But what do we want to go as a board with this so that we can give clear direction to get forward, move forward with this? If we have any insight from any of my colleagues, I want to see where we would go. Board Member McCoy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I
sir.
was under the hope, I know you said, and I had a brief conversation with Mr. Grace. I don't see him. Is he still here?
I don't see, somebody said he was here, but I don't see him now.
And then I think he kind of stated and started off on some of the conversations that I heard from Mr. Evans regarding utilizing U.S. water to come in from an operational standpoint.
Yeah, we believe we did have some of those meetings. I met with Mr. Nigel Grace. I'm hearing you did as well. But that was the expectation and hope for tonight. Mr. Evans, do we have an update on that?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Concerning the discussions with U.S. Water,
Yes, sir.
we're probably most likely going to bring them in under my authority in the interim, but look to bring you a contract for consideration at your next utility district meeting. So we are moving quickly, and so we're going to triage operations and bring folks in as quickly as possible and then look for some ratification from the board. So Mr. Grace is facilitating the conversations and discussions with them. They also have the capabilities to lean in on the water treatment plant as well to assist us on that, because that is their skill set and their bandwidth. And so we are looking to attack the relationship with them from multiple angles. How can they help us? Wells plant as well as the water treatment plant. So.
Okay. And ECR's next meeting is the third week of August. Will we be having a utility district meeting prior to that? I don't believe so. So do we need to have something before that board meeting with the ECR? Because I know you had some concerns.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think it probably falls on the same day the same day that the district will meet on the 21st. I'll attend the meeting and communicate to them. I won't obviously sit on behalf of the city. I'll just be there present, just communicating to them that it's the board's intention to hopefully name a successor at your August 21st meeting. And so any substantive discussions, it would be the city's desire that the board, and I can provide correspondence to them as well, that the board grant us the opportunity to fill the seat and not discuss anything of great substantive nature that's could potentially impact us in the interim period.
And I guess finally to that point, the reason, and just for clarity for all of our public that's watching, we made a decision last week to remove our former director from the executive director role because we received notice from the health district. We finally received information and we received the data and the documents that we needed to make a decision. And we made the decision based on that. Mr. Evans, we've noticed that there's been certain things that have been dragging and we want to be updated on a consistent basis as to what's going on so we can update the public. We know that we have to wait on the data to come in. We have to wait on all the information to come in so we can give them clear, honest transparency. But to that same point, even in your department, if you have to do an investigation to get to the bottom of anything that's happening, we want you to take the lead so that you can report to us and not wait a year out. We need to be clear with our residents so that they don't have an expectation of us that we can't clearly meet with them. And we made a decision as a board once we had all the information. So if the residents are watching and they want to know what's going on, we are keeping you safe based upon the information we have. Any additional comments from our board?
Yes.
Board Member McCoy.
In addition, can we also be provided with the utility services agreement as well?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Evans?
The couple of documents that you'll be receiving from me is one, the initial warning letter from the health department, the agreement with the ECR, the USD charter, as well as the USD service agreement. So those are agreements that I have written down to effectively provide to you. Also, I'm going to incorporate the utility district job description as well. Utility district director job description as well.
Mr. Chair, but would either yourself or the vice chair be interested in being appointed in the interim as the representative for the ECR and can attend and facilitate and participate, I'm sorry, not facilitate, participate with staff in advisory capacity?
That is the third Wednesday. Board Member Lanier, would you be interested in serving on the ECR in the interim?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Ms. Evans?
I don't know if it's a staff thing. I don't know if elected.
Wonderful. That's what I love.
So I have to.
That's exactly my point. To put something in front of us, to ask us to vote on it, and nobody can actually tell us the convention of what the ECR, the East Coast Regional Authority is. And I'm just like, now you know what? I actually said that. I said this to email to Mr. Evans this afternoon because I was in the middle of doing some work duties, and I'm saying to myself, this can't be for real. This is what staff asked us to do. And I said, good afternoon. It's now 2:11 p.m. and the meeting scheduled for 5 o'clock, which leaves just over 2.5 hours for review. I'm not sure what the delay is in providing the agenda materials to the UD board, but there is no possible way that this board can make an informed decision without having sufficient time to review the materials. Seemingly, the emergency meeting should be canceled unless staff wants the board to make a rubber stamp decision. This will be futile. So this is exactly what this is exactly what I actually said. They don't give us enough information. They want us to come in here and rubber stamp something. I don't like this. And this is why I don't want things to filter through administration. Because by the time it gets it and we're asked to make a life-changing decision that's going to impact everybody. And this is unacceptable. And nobody has provided, Mr. Evans, you have not provided any explanation as to why 7 times 24 is, I don't know how many hours, but we've had 7 complete days that we knew that this meeting was going to take place. Every one of these items has been on this agenda before in the past. So this was not anything new that had to be recreated from scratch. So I don't understand, and you're asking us to vote on something when nobody can tell us what the convention of the interlocal agreement for the ECR is. That just makes me feel sick that if I make a decision, I'm going to have to live with it, even though I don't have the right information, and it could be very much detrimental to the future. That's the challenge. Like, I don't get that. Is nobody else outraged behind that?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans?
This board and previous boards have consistently, since the inception of the ECR, which predates all of us, has made a staff person serve on that board as a routine agenda item, probably with invariably no discussion. We did work on Saturday. Staff came in on Monday. Mr. Doyle and I had to meet with the entire team. Mr. Doyle has been meeting with his staff to find out operationally some of the things that are happening. So invariably, people have to have uninterrupted time to write these agenda items to put this item forward. And I can tell you that between pulling Mr. Doyle from off the water plant to effectively out of meetings, out of interviews, to write agenda items, everyone is jumping in to effectively do it. I can assure you, it's not going to happen again. We're not going to have an emergency meeting, but I can tell you that staff was working diligently to try to get these items queued up and ready. And we'll make sure that we do a better job in making sure you get this stuff in adequate time. But certainly, it's not a situation that anyone was holding back the information to provide it to the board.
Mr. Chair, and this is what I believe. Staff is too naive to recognize that they have taken on more than they can actually handle. This goes to the very point of I don't understand how you can properly execute your duties that you actually asked for more in resolution 32-19 if we're having these sort of issues where a board that can't even get the same rehash items that we've had before 2 years ago placed and given to us in a timely fashion. So that way, when I ask questions about the ECR in this interlocal agreement and the composition and convention, we can actually be able to make this decision. But you're saying that we should not make a decision because we don't know what may be in the agreement. But what I'm saying to you is this, Mr. Evans, either way you look at it, it's unacceptable. So at some point, staff and yourself specifically has to own it. You're telling me about what they've done. In the last 72 hours, I probably had about 9 hours of sleep. So you know what? If people want to get it done, they'll get it done. And if you can't get it done, Mr. Evans, perhaps we need to figure out you're not the best person. We just need to completely, and that's exactly what the point I'm saying. We need to just cut you out of this equation altogether, because if we have someone that reports directly to us, who has the autonomy to be able to bring on the necessary resources to get it done, I want to be able to do that. But I don't want to sit here and have to be in here and hold my nose when I vote, because I'm afraid that if I vote and not have the right information, that it's going to be something that's going to come back to bite us, like we've seen time and time again. And I think I'm done on this, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Me as well, sir. We will be starting our next meeting, CRA meeting, in 10 minutes. No further business of the city. The USD meeting is adjourned.